The shocking truths about the biggest wastes of money in history. The Darien scheme. For those who don't know, it was Scotland's attempt to set up a colony in Panama and link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. About 20% of Scotland's wealth was thrown at it, and it completely failed in just 2 short years. It turns out Scottish people don't survive long in the sun in the tropics. It's like Wicked Witch of the West getting splashed with water. This is the answer. Imagine throwing so much money at a project only for it to immediately fail, and in order to survive, you need to merge your country with another country. Got to be that person who bought the first ever tweet as an NFT, purchased for $2.9 billion, now worth $4. I totally forgot about the NFT hype. That was a weird few months when a non-trivial number of people were trying to convince me a JPEG of a poorly drawn monkey was somehow worth more than a car. Me forgetting to turn off the lights, according to my dad. The CIA putting a microphone into a cat to spy on commies only for that cat to immediately get hit by a car. I think it was like $6 million and countless years of preparation and training only to be lost under some tires. And with what I know about cats, it can't be ruled out that the cat did it on purpose, purely because it knew how much it would inconvenience the CIA agents. What fascinated me about Acoustic Kitten, that's the name of the operation, is that anyone that spent 3 minutes with a cat will know that all of this was a very, very stupid idea. I can only explain it as a result of the amount of substances the CIA was using at that moment. $4 trillion to replace the Afghan insurgents, only for them to be replaced with more of the same thing, has got to be right up there. The whole Mo throwing Barney out at the bar meme comes to mind. I'd have to say that gym membership I didn't cancel until 8 years after I moved away from the gym. Look, I know that this is a partial joke answer and very much small fish compared to some of the other ventures here, but my god, the personal lack of action on display here is absolutely breathtaking. Was your life that busy that you didn't notice the several $100s of wasted money? Or are you just that lazy and unmotivated? It's almost impressive if it's the latter one. Probably the Dutch guy who spent money buying tulips in 1636. $35 billion for the Metaverse. Mark was really inspired by Ready Player One. The Great Wall of Gorgon, built by the ancient Sasanian Empire in modern-day Iran. The purpose was to protect themselves from nomadic invaders. It was constructed with 100 million man-days of labor, which is equivalent to around 300,000 workers toiling for 5 years straight. Considering the average labor cost, material expenses, and other related expenditures, the total cost of the project could have reached an astronomical sum of approximately $130 billion in today's dollars. Needless to say that it failed its intended purpose, as Huns devised techniques to overcome the wall without much hassle. I can't believe nobody's mentioned World War I. Literally all of the world's most wealthy nations completely financially ruining themselves and slaughtering a large proportion of their young men, and all the historical consequences that followed over essentially nothing, and achieving nothing except for a massive geopolitical regression with costs which we're arguably still reeling from today. New Zealand spent about $25 million in their own currency on a flag referendum. Before it started, the public were against it, saying they'd never change the flag. The government persisted anyway. 2 years later, the public voted to keep our current flag, so we did. Massive frickin' waste of time and money for a result they should have been expecting from the very beginning. Hey, it wasn't a complete waste of money. It produced Laser Kiwi. Look it up if you haven't seen this majestic beast already. The War on Substances. They won. What could possibly go wrong with handing the manufacture, distribution, and retail of powerful, addictive substances to organized crime? Nobody could have foreseen that being a problem. NFTs for sure. I remember Seth Green was going to make a whole show based around his NFT monkey that someone stole and then bought from under his nose, and the show got stuck in a limbo. That was kind of funny. The banana with the duct tape. The purchase included instructions on how to renovate the art piece when the banana is eaten. You go to a store and buy a new one, and then use the supplied tape to stick it to a wall. It's the art that keeps on giving. The Cleveland Browns paying $250 million for Deshaun Watson. Okay, story time for non-Americans who don't know who Deshaun Watson is and why that number is so awful. The Cleveland Browns have long been one of the worst teams in the NFL. A while back, they finally made it to the playoffs, thanks to the effort of one Baker Mayfield, another quarterback. However, Browns' front office, for some idiotic reason, didn't want to retain Mayfield, and so decided to spend $230 to $250 million on Deshaun Watson, as well as include several draft picks in that trade. At the time, Watson had been a quarterback for the Houston Texans, and in his prime was seen as a generational talent who could take a good team to the Super Bowl. At the same time, allegations of a pretty concerning nature were springing up against Watson, totaling about 20 women. It doesn't matter if he was the best quarterback in history, that's awful PR, and it teed off the entire NFL fanbase. Still, the Browns paid for him. Cut to 2025, and Baker Mayfield was able to make it to the playoffs with his new team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even though they'd just lost before. And Deshaun Watson has played frickin' awful football with the Cleveland Browns. He's genuinely one of the worst quarterbacks out there. He'd been suspended for 11 games due to the allegations, and he'd taken numerous major injuries since getting signed. His most recent one being tearing his ACL, which knocks you out for the season. Before the Watson trade, the Browns were seen as a team people pitied, because it felt like they could never catch a break each and every year. Now they're a reviled fan base, and I don't see their reputation ever recovering until every single person involved with that trade is fired and out of the organization. In short, the Cleveland Browns replaced their already good quarterback Baker Mayfield with an alleged R-wordist in Deshaun Watson for millions of guaranteed dollars, only for that quarterback to be absolute trash. And as a small addition, his contract is fully guaranteed. The only way for the Browns to void it is if he either medically retires or if he's convicted or accused of another unspeakable act crime outside of the 20+ that they knew about before he was signed. Most of Dubai's artificial islands. Those guys who bought tickets to the Titanic sub. The Acoustic Kitty Project. It was a covert CIA operation during the Cold War that aimed to use a cat as a mobile eavesdropping device. Why a cat? Well, they have a natural ability to move discreetly, blend into the environment without raising suspicion, and were allowed around and inside the Kremlin. The hope was that the cat, fitted with advanced listening equipment, could wander undetected near Soviet officials and pick up private conversations. The project, which cost over $20 million, involved surgically implanting a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a small transmitter in its chest, and an antenna running along its tail. The technology was cutting edge for the time, and the idea was to create a living, undetectable spy tool. However, the project quickly ran into problems. Cats are notoriously independent and difficult to train, often ignoring commands and getting distracted. On its first test mission, the cat was reportedly sent to eavesdrop on a conversation outside a Soviet compound, but it wandered off. Some accounts suggest it was tragically hit by a car shortly after deployment. Ultimately, the project was deemed a failure, and the CIA concluded that animals, especially cats, were too unpredictable for espionage purposes. All that planning foiled by the old, "Will someone please get that damn cat out of here?" defense? I mean, my corporate offices are just full of random cats wandering around. Goodness knows how many of them are corporate spies, but our maintenance staff clearly have a soft spot for those cuties. I didn't see this bloody cat coming up twice in one video, that's for sure. But yep, as someone wrote earlier, relying on a cat for literally anything other than it demanding food in a way that suggests it's never been fed in its life before is a futile task. Internet in Australia. Back in the 2000s, an outgoing Labor government proposed a $30 billion fibre-to-the-premise nationwide broadband network internet plan, promising speeds of up to 100 megabits per second. The incoming coalition government promised a cheaper fibre-to-the-node broadband network that utilised the already installed copper wiring for just under $950 million. And now, because of that, the internet in Australia is just barely becoming able to reach speeds on 1,000 megabits a second after a revision to the planned rollout, which has cost the Australian government over $70 billion. The war on substances, maybe. Trillions of dollars later, and smack is 50 times cheaper and 10 times more potent. The monorail in Springfield. I disagree. There's nothing on earth like a genuine, bona fide, electrified 6-car monorail. King Louis IX spent something like the entire GDP worth of France on religious relics such as a piece of the True Cross, a sliver of wood said to have been from the cross that Jesus was crucified on. It doesn't take a genius to see that it was fake now. All of the claimed pieces of the True Cross in existence today add up to far more than the size of the original cross. Brexit. Tanking the economy to own the libs. But at least the NHS is well funded now. Quantitative easing and the banking bailout. We've created a system where businesses can be too big to fail and they can expect a bailout when they get into trouble. But when times are good, all the profits go to their shareholders. So we've privatized profit and socialized risk. This means we've effectively rigged the game for capitalism, making a system where market forces are no longer fully in play and creating zombie companies that should have folded a long time ago. My old boss was something of an industry darling, and while I worked with him, he got poached off to a smaller competitor on the promise of joining upper management there. But the thing is, all of those record-setting sales numbers were fake and everybody knew it. He'd been caught cooking the books and destroying product on multiple occasions, and he'd been caught taking huge kickbacks from tertiary suppliers. He'd even just, not show up sometimes. So I don't really know what to make of that. The books were clearly cooked and everyone involved was totally aware of it. I think that either the entire thing was a fraudulent house of cards that everyone was taking advantage of to embezzle, or the real books showed that despite all of that, he was actually the GOAT, which means everyone across the industry was doing this. I then went on to a smaller company that was starting to get big on a new and innovative product, except that they were in the red to the tune of $2 million a year. The entire company was entirely supported by private investors. Apparently, this is both normal and good in the business world. I don't know, man. I don't think money is real. I think certain people just never questioned whether or not they actually have what they say they have, and success is just how close you can get to these people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Panama Canal first attempt. The French didn't understand what they were getting themselves into, and death from mosquitoes killed off too many that the project had to be abandoned. 22,000 people died and a huge part of the French population went bankrupt after having invested their savings in the company because the guy behind it had created the Suez Canal, which was a giant success. But the issue is that Panama is full of malaria mosquitoes and it's impossible to do anything there. Workers died like flies. When the US government took over, they were better prepared, as they learned much from the failed attempt. They started a civil war in Colombia to create a new country for the canal, and then covered up any puddle or water container they found. Then sprayed deadly chemicals everywhere. It was the only way to do it. Bailing out billion-dollar companies during COVID, like Delta Airlines, which charges me $50 to bring a bag on an airplane, instead of, training new doctors or fast-tracking those already in med school, or paying off their student loan debt. I can't believe no one has mentioned the failed Siege of Rhodes in 305 to 304 BC. Long story short, Demetrius I, king of Macedon, was afraid of Rhodes' naval power and their potential alliance with Egypt. Demetrius decides he's going to attack Rhodes, but to do so he's going to need massive machines of war. With Alexander the Great's innovations, Demetrius bolstered and scaled them up. This guy was known as the Besieger for his skill in siege warfare. Demetrius invents and has the Helepolis built, a massive rolling tower on wheels. The Helepolis was a great siege tower, 130 feet tall and 65 feet wide. It sat on 8 wheels and casters, so it could be moved forward and back and laterally as well. It had multiple stories connected by sturdy stairs, one for ascending and one for descending. Its sides were iron-plated for fireproofing, and it had portals that opened when the catapults fired. The Helepolis weighed 160 tons and required hundreds of men to move it via the capstan and belt drive, and thousands more to push it from behind. It contained a variety of armaments on each of its 9 floors. 2 180-pound catapults and 1 60-pounder were on the first floor. The catapults were categorized by the weight of the missile it threw. 3 60-pounders were on the second floor, and 2 30-pounders on each floor above that. The top 2 floors contained men armed with bows and dart throwers for killing defenders on the city walls. The tower's ironclad, mechanically adjusted apertures were lined with animal skins, wool, and seaweed to make them fireproof. The Helepolis was the largest siege tower of its time. When Demetrius brought the Helepolis to bear, the Rhodians knocked a hole through their own wall under the cover of night, where they expected the Helepolis to attack. They then flooded the entire area with water and sewage, so that when the massive tower was moved up the next morning, it became deeply mired in mud. Ultimately, the siege failed and Demetrius left Rhodes, leaving behind all of his siege engines. Years later, the Rhodians sold the remains of those engines, including the Helepolis, which earned them enough money to build one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. This is certainly the flaw in Death Star-style tactics relying on one massive superweapon, isn't it? All the eggs in one basket. Should have just built a bunch of regular siege towers. Some of them make it to the walls and you throw lives at the problem until it goes away. Sieges are always costly, there's no way around it. Take your gruesome victory instead of the humiliating defeat. Although, maybe this defeat lost fewer men. Maybe things were better this way. Scientology. Well, for most people, but for a small few it makes them wealthy and powerful. When COVID was in full swing and the entire trading market crashed, then the Federal Reserve tried to stimulate and save our overlord corporate scum by injecting $3 trillion into the stock market just for it to immediately crash again like 2 minutes later. AOL merger with Time Warner. The Vietnam War at $176 billion. Countless dead for no reason and nothing positive came of it. Well, we got Apocalypse Now for what that's worth. When I bought tickets to Joker 2, the first movie was enough. Joker 2 should have had him riding off into the sunset to start his career as the Joker with Harley. I cannot believe what they did. It was awful. Maybe the real Joker was the one who bought the tickets along the way. Stonehenge. The whole thing was supposed to be 18 inches tall, but the work crew misread the runes. The Iraq War, 2003 through 2011. Regarding the cost, estimates vary, but it's in the trillions of dollars, with some sources suggesting around $3 trillion when including long-term healthcare for veterans, interest on borrowed money, and a few other considerations. Funko Pops. Oh, it's not like they're that expensive unless you're really into rare collecting. You can find a lot for like $7 at Five Below, or $15 or so elsewhere, and some people like them. I don't really care about them at all, but my son thinks they're fun to have, so he's got about 12 to 15 of characters that he likes and just has them on display. They're not any more expensive or wasteful than other types of home decor, just not everyone's style. Jeff Bezos' $42 million clock that will allegedly run for 10,000 years. I'm no fan of Jeff Amazon, but this is essentially a conceptual art project, so I don't think it can truly be called a waste of money because I think the goals of the project are being met. When the US government bailed out Goldman Sachs after Goldman Sachs bought AIG's failing bonds at pennies on the dollar, fully knowing that they'd fail and getting bailed out by ex-Goldman Sachs Ben Bernanke at the full face value of the bonds. Biggest robbery of the American taxpayer and largest waste of money in history. Colin Powell's lies about weapons of mass destruction and the resulting war on terror is also up there. But to be fair, the US had to respond to September 11th physically. It was just so overblown. Indulgences, as in the free pass given for sins during the Crusades. You could literally buy God's forgiveness for sins past or future. I'm no accountant, but I'm pretty sure that's a waste of money. That's what some sucker in purgatory says. Anyone who ever invested a cent into meme coins, especially the Hawk coin. Oh god, that one dude lost his kid's college fund on the Hawk coin. I hope that was fake, but if it wasn't, man, that makes me feel good about myself. At least I haven't screwed up that bad. Okay, it's not the dumbest, but it's a personal favorite of mine. The US military spent hundreds of millions developing the XM29 rifle. It was basically a grenade launcher with some extra bells and whistles. They wanted to replace the M16, so every grunt would be carrying one. In a shockingly unshocking turn of events, that's a frickin' war crime. 300+ millions of dollars later, and a single Google search could have prevented it. Everyone here has better answers, but I've got to mention Twitter. What an absolutely idiotic way to buy a company. Acquire because someone told you can't, fire 80% of the staff, abolish the branding completely, remove mod support, offer worthless utilities that used to be free as part of a premium service, then force push notifications to every single user that are really just your own personal tweets. And when people still won't listen to you masquerade as an anonymous user on your own app or company, artificially inflate your own follower account and be your own biggest hype man. Nah fam, he bought the presidency and increased his net worth by like 200 billion just from that. Oligarchy, baby. The UK voting for Brexit. This has cost billions already in lost GDP, with the eventual figure likely in the hundreds of billions as its impact compounds in the decades to come. Collective madness. Capitalist agriculture and food distribution. Like every second potato is just thrown away. Milk is overproduced and thrown away, cow hides are destroyed rather than tanned for leather to keep leather prices stable, insecticides and herbicides to maintain massive monocrops, killing pollinators and low-key poisoning us, instead of higher total mass yield, less intensive multi-cropping, like keeping pigs on an apple orchard to eat the fallen apples, where the apple-eating beetles lay their eggs to kill off a pest instead of spraying poison everywhere. Nope, but instead we feed the pigs unsold grocery store stuff, all ground up, with the packaging left on rather than paying people to take it off first. So much for labor efficiency, thanks capitalist goons. Restaurants aren't sending their best either. It's waste, cruelty, and exploration all around the chain, and the cost is incalculably high. Tax breaks for the rich. That pair of roller skates I bought during the pandemic. Pretty much any of the hobbies taken up during the pandemic. Cut away to the crochet kit under the bed, coughing with dust. I mean, this is really just an ego plug for me, but my pandemic sourdough is still going strong, baby. Although all the miniatures I bought do in fact bring me to your level. Right here in the losing spender side with you, actually. When Mobutu decided to print Zaire money, but the cost of print turned out more expensive than the total worth of the printed money. Politicians spending hours of taxpayer-funded time on oral masturbation speeches to promote themselves when they already know how they'll vote on things, plus the time spent on researching and speech writing. In human history? I don't know, but I have a smaller anecdote that I witnessed personally. They wanted to automate the cranes where I used to work and wouldn't take input from any of the crane operators. They very grossly misunderstood the speed at which we ran them and used every other mill that had automated cranes as a reference. After having worked in countless other mills since as a contractor, I'll put those operators up to toe with any other mill anywhere in the world and blindly put an absurd amount of money on it. The contracted team actually found improvements to the industry standard of automated cranes and steel mills. They achieved a peak rate of 205 picks in 24 hours. But we were routinely at a pace of over 750 in 24 hours, with a few peaks of over 1,100. 100 people advising against the idea to an entire committee couldn't make the point that the best steel mills in the world aren't the best because they have automated cranes, they can have an automated crane because they're operated like the best steel mills in the world. We just weren't operated well. Anyway, something like 80 million and 3 years later, plus the cost of production downtime during each test, and they scrapped the project, and the cranes are ready to be automated at the flip of a switch that hasn't been flipped in 5 years.
Parents, have any of you regretted the names you have given your children? I used to work tech support with a guy whose name was Gandalf. In the 70s, when he was born, Tolkien wasn't even a nerd thing. It was a hippie thing. His parents were big hippies and loved the books. So they named him Gandalf. His sister's middle name is Galadriel. He said at first people rarely recognized the name. It was a weird name, sure, but few people knew he was named after a fictional wizard. Until the movies came out. He hates Peter Jackson. Well, for one thing, leave Peter Jackson alone. The only people that individual has to blame are their parents. And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe it's because I grew up with a name that is very nice, but people bullied me and ridiculed me for it for years. But I don't know. I think Gandalf could work. I think they can make it work. 12 years ago, we had twin boys. We knew one would be Thomas after my wife's uncle, but struggled to name the second. For about 28 hours, he was Baby B, when we finally settled on Jeremiah. 2 days later, we introduced them to our pastor, and he said, "Oh, cute, Tom and Jerry." I looked at my wife, and we were both thinking, oh, we did not just do that, but we left it. My God, the fights those brothers must have had. My friend's parents met during the 60s, and they were/are crazy hippies, and they have practiced a lot of different religions. When my friend was born, they decided to give him 14 middle names: Dorsey, Abdul, Jaleel, Francis, Brian, Albert, Barney, Willie, Kowalski, Jeffrey, Faith, Love Star, Breeze. He has a common first and last name, and they said all of that at graduation. Well, goddamn, they might have practiced a lot of different religions, but clearly the son took on Christianity because he honored the crap out of the name his mother and father gave him. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's a middle name. It's avoidable. I work in a social services agency that deals with children. The names I have seen are quite amazing. Along with random variations of names and brands of alcohol, you get some interesting biblical ones too. Like the 3 kids in one family named Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. The one that I cringed at the most, though, was this poor little girl named Erotica. They are not even giving her a chance. Oh, this makes me wonder if maybe there should be rules where it's like, oh, what's your baby's name? Oh, it's Erotica. Oh, I'm sorry, man, but this baby is immediately being taken to Child Protective Services. I think my mother regrets my name. She wanted to call me Sebastian, but my grandmother insisted she would call me Sebastard, but with a D. She caved and named me Joshua. So when we had our first son, we named him Sebastian. I've never seen my mother so happy. My grandmother calls him by his middle name. I think I'm more interested in the story of why grandmother hates the name Sebastian so much. Is it the name of a lover who scorned her, a mortal enemy, a dog she didn't like? There was a kid at my school called Internet Castle. This is not a joke, by the way. Internet Castle. Hopefully none of these people like giving out absolute full names or anything like that, but I can't help but worry a little bit, and maybe the producers will confirm this with me or not, but are we kind of doxing people by reading these? Well, my mother doesn't regret naming me Shaw. Doesn't seem so bad because it's a fair family name. But as my first name, it causes great confusion. For example, if I introduce myself to someone, I have to clarify that my name isn't actually Sean or Sean or Shaw. Then, of course, the conversation goes as follows. Yeah, it's spelled S-H-A-W, and they say, "Are you sure?" Which sounds exactly like "Are you sure?" in my regional accent. He drops an F-bomb at the end of this, but there's no real good supplement for an F-bomb just on its own. I work at a clinic with parental moms. Once baby is born, I help make sure they're coming in for appointments. I can't tell you the feelings I felt trying to schedule an appointment for Brenpen, the newborn. Brenpen sounds a bit silly, but I don't think anything's gonna beat naming your little girl Erotica. Like, it's gonna take something real bad for me to be like, yeah, that's worse than Erotica. My actual first name is Jeff. People think I'm from New Zealand and I'm saying Jeff. Thanks, Mom and Dad. It could still be worse. Consider your initials carefully. My surname begins with a W. My brother had a daughter and named her Jennifer Elizabeth. Pretty vanilla, huh? They got a ton of blankets and cups with Jew embroidered, engraved on each piece. We aren't Jewish. That's pretty funny, yeah. My wife regrets my kid's initials, FCK, but I think his pickup line choices could be hilarious. My initials are FCK. All I need is you. Okay, yeah, that's really good, actually. Almost on topic, my Nigerian friend was telling me that when he was teaching in Louisiana, the black people would come up and ask him if their names meant anything back in Africa. Apparently, 2 African Americans were named after furniture, but he was nice about it and said something like Proud Lion and Lord of Many. Line of them was probably for the best, but I'm just picturing him looking them in the eye and be like, "You are footstool." My middle name is My Love. It's not my first name, but it still stuns people when I first tell them. That was a little ha-ha at the end, and I just felt like doing a Scooby-Doo laugh. My mother and stepfather picked out and agreed upon a name for my little sister while my mom was pregnant. Her middle name was supposed to be Kate. Stepman never said anything about it. He liked it, was fine with it. Baby gets born, birth certificate is being written out, mom's exhausted, so she lets baby's dad deal with it. A few weeks later, mom takes a look at the new social security card and birth certificate and flips her lid because the middle name on all this paperwork is Lay, even though that name had never come up in discussion. She didn't even know until she stumbled across it by accident quite a bit too late. My parents are hippies that grew up in the 70s. Thankfully, I got away with a reasonable name. Jem. I've seen Jem in the holograms. My 2 younger brothers are named Conan and Torald. Our parents have never expressed regret over any of our names, though. I'm a guy, and my parents were inspired by Harper Lee when naming me. They were really hoping for a girl, and the first choices for names were Kitty or Jem with a G. My dad said they didn't think of any boy names until after I was born. Then they remembered the character in To Kill a Mockingbird and changed Jem to J-E-M. Voila! Torald. A pretty cool name. And what is with these hippies naming their kids after fictional characters? I mean, even I have a name that's like kind of, it's not specifically, but I share a name with a few popular fictional characters. My first name is just a letter. It gets better. I have an identical twin brother, and his first name is also a letter. We each have normal middle names, but letters is first names. It's because my dad thought it looked elegant, and not typical letters. I'm talking about 3 of the last letters. Thanks, Dad. Filling out any sort of paperwork for damn near anything is a pain in the butt. I know I can change my name, but I don't want to go through that hassle when I'm already used to the crappy name I was given. To answer OP's question, my dad doesn't regret it, but my mom wishes he would have waited until after the epidural wore off from her C-section to name us. The names are X and Z, so much for privacy. I posted this as a reply, but I thought I should address the justified claims indicating my mom might have gone along with the letters X and Z as first names. So I asked my mom why she was out. She's 5 foot and 95 pounds, she's an emergency room physician, and when the day arrived for my twin and I to be born, she didn't have any contractions. Typically, twins aren't carried full term, but here we are 9 months later and full term. The obstetrician decided that a cesarean would be the safest choice considering my mother was 40 at the time. The anesthesiologist administered the epidural, but it was too large a dose for my mom, seeing as she's such a tiny person. When my mother was having a hard time breathing, she told the anesthesiologist that she knew the area above the diaphragm had been numbed and started to panic because she couldn't breathe, and so the anesthesiologist administered a dose of Valium, so my mom became unconscious. When she awoke, she realized for the first time that my dad definitely married up. I ain't even gonna say anything about the names. In fact, overall, I'm not gonna insult people for the names that they're given or anything. The worst one so far, as I've said, it's erotica. It's still gonna be erotica by the end of this, I imagine. But goddamn, what's with these men and just not discussing with their wives what they're gonna name their children, or just going rogue? A friend's middle name is Baldric. His parents thought it would be funny after watching too much Blackadder. For the uninitiated, Blackadder is a really funny English television series set around the 1500s because Queen Elizabeth is a main character in it, and then there was Blackadder Goes Forth, where it's set in the trenches of World War II. Anyway, Baldric is basically a massive idiot who usually screws things up, or maybe inadvertently kind of helps in his own stupid way. My legal name was Carne Asada Jones. I had it changed at 18. They basically called him Sliced Beef, for those who don't know. You know what? I'm actually going to give that name second place for worst name on this list. It's still behind erotica, but not bad, not bad. My friend and her brother are from Taiwan. When they moved to Australia, they were young. Their father chose Western-sounding names for them. My friend ended up with a relatively normal, if old-fashioned name, but he got her brother's name from a thesaurus. His name is Roget. Also, my ex's sister was born in Ethiopia, and whoever filled out the birth certificate must not have had very good English, because her name has about 4 times as many vowels as it strictly needs. And once I saw a girl working in a fast food restaurant with a name tag that read alimony. I have a mate whose name is Irwin. Not horrible, but his brother's is Irvin. Okay, personally, I gotta say, I actually really like the name Roget. I think that sounds cool, but Irwin, there's nothing wrong with the name, and Irvin is fine too, I guess, but when I hear the name Irwin, all I'm getting are flashes of that kid from bloody Billy and Mandy. My best friend named her firstborn son Jaden. When she told me the name, I asked her if she really wanted to do that. She said yes. That and her husband liked the name but wanted to make it a little different by adding an additional N. She now regrets it. The fact that she regrets it shouldn't bring me joy, but it does. Good luck on those biz cards, little guy. I am not quite sure what's actually wrong with that name. It looks a little bit silly on paper, I guess, but everyone in the comments below even is just oh, this name sucks. I knew a girl in high school named Cassiopeia. People called her Cass for short. I got why she was named that. Her dad was an astronomer by profession. There's not a single thing wrong with that name. It's kind of cute, if anything. I once knew a guy in high school whose last name was Sweat, and the poor dude's parents made his first name Richard. That's right. Connect the dots. See, I don't think that's that bad, really, because it's just the nickname that everyone, knows goes with that for some reason, but that's not their name. But, of course, it is unfortunate. My ex and I had a great marriage until it fell apart 14 years in. Up to that point, the worst thing we ever fought about was baby names and paint colors. She wanted our first to be Zebulon Zachariah. Not even kidding. We fought and fought about it. She was dead serious, and I was completely baffled as to how she thought that was a good idea. Finally talked her into a more sane first name and conceded Zachary as a middle name. Second child, she wanted D'Artagnan. Little Dart, she would say. Oh, hell no. We fought over this one while she was in labor. On the way to the hospital. She wasn't giving up. I won that one too, with something not common but sane at least. Third child, she was back on the D'Artagnan train. Fought for 9 solid months. Thank God that one was a girl. Okay, Zebulon, kinda ridiculous, but D'Artagnan, ooh, Dart. Darty boy, D'Artagnan, my friend. Nah, D'Artagnan sounds cold as fur. Maybe you could shorten Zebulon to just Zeb. That sounds kinda cool. Just Zeb, though. Do not put Zebulon on the birth certificate. I went to a summer camp with a guy called Raymond. Seriously, first name Raymond, second name Raymond. Naturally, we gave him hell for it. Me. So, were your parents drunk or something? Raymond squared. I was named after a very well-respected relative, actually. Me. So, were his parents drunk? He didn't talk to me much after that. 10 out of 10 roasting, I'll give you that, but see, this is why I don't really make fun of people's names or anything like that, because you do not control your name when you are born. I'm not going to take the mick out of someone for something that they didn't have a choice in. My husband and I had a deal. If it was a girl, I got to pick, and if it was a boy, he did. Our son's name is Loki. I'm not a big fan, but he loves it. I keep hoping it will grow on me. Norse god of mischief? You're just asking for a little Hellraiser at that point. Now I got that picture of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy in my head, where Billy goes to Valhalla and and Loki is like this skinny guy like pulling on an elastic band, and Odin goes, "Loki, remember what happened last time?" as he points to his eye. Yeah, all you normies will bring up Marvel or something, but frankly, I'm so totally goddamn done with Marvel. We named our daughter Isabel because it was a name on both of our lists that matched. We wanted a long name, something regal but could be shortened up. We talked about Elizabeth, Victoria, those sort of names. Decided on Isabel. My only regret is we did this as Twilight was dying down and everyone assumed her name was Isabella, even after I spelt it out over the phone for them several times, with an E on the end, Isabel. People would ask and still ask, "Oh, do you call her Bella? That'd be so cute." No, shut the hell up. You know what? That would that'd be kind of infuriating. Not a parent, and sort of the opposite here. My brother and his then-fiancée were about to have a kid, and they argued about the name all the way to the delivery room. He wasn't around when they had to do the paperwork for the baby's name, and he was upset when she named their son Logan. I mentioned to him that it's not a terrible name. After all, it's Wolverine's name. About a week or so later, I hear him on the phone with a friend talking about how he didn't like the name until he realized that his kid is named after Wolverine. Logan. Strong, manly name. It's a name you gotta live up to, though. My wife and I have a daughter that we named Jordan. I'm fine with that. My wife is a very independent woman, and Jordan is kind of a strong name for a girl. Now we're thinking about having another kid, and if it's a boy, she wants to name him Michael. Jordan and Michael. Michael and Jordan. I'm 6'7", she's 6'3", and both very white. She somehow thinks it won't be weird if our most likely tall children are named after freaking Michael Jordan. I don't want to be answering questions or listening to jokes about their names for the next 20 years, though. I don't really get this dude's damage, to be honest. I mean, is that what people are gonna think about when you hear them or call them? It's like, Michael Jordan. Yeah, people are gonna think it, but it's like, whatever, who gives a crap? I have a friend from high school who has 4 kids. Oldest is Landon, perfectly normal if very popular. Second is Kitten, getting more odd but still in the realm of normal. Third and only girl is Kensley. Now you're just making things up. And she's due any day with her 4th, Brogan. I really hope they are done since the names are getting progressively worse. My cousin also just had a baby and I have no idea how to pronounce the name. Ellie, best guess is like Ellie, but no one can confirm this. Okay, well, earlier I said that you can name your kids whatever you want and stuff, just don't make it erotica or anything like that. It's like the people earlier saying Jaden with a double N at the end and stuff like that. I don't get the point of naming your kids pretty regular stuff, but being like, oh, it's going to be a regular name, but I'm going to like add different letters to it so it just sounds the same. And it's like, what's the point? I guess this will get buried, but this thread seems to be filled with not answers to the question. So I named my oldest daughter Darien because my husband, then we were 17 and very stupid, wanted to call the baby Damien. And this was my compromise because I wasn't naming a child after the demon child in The Omen. Also, there was a female DJ on the radio at the time called Darien, so I thought it would work. Well, it turns out that Darien is most often a boy's name and very often a black name. My daughter is in her 20s now and she has never let me live it down. Everywhere she goes, people expect a black man. She's a nerdy, short, white chick. I swear I had good intentions. I was literally just thinking to myself as I read that Darien's more of a boy's name, isn't it? Used to work with a girl named Latrina. Latrine jokes constantly. Any name that has an easy joke to make is a bad idea. Poor kid is going to hear it 1,000 times. Oh boy, howdy, do I know that feeling. 50 years ago, the family a few doors down from me had a son. They called him Boyd. His surname is George. They are fundamentalist Christians. Bet they regretted that. So rather than Boy George, it's Boyd George? In Chile, we have an urban legend that in Valparaiso, one of our main port cities, there are many kids named Usnavi. Why, you ask? Well, being a port city, it is host to ships from worldwide navies from time to time, including the U.S. Navy. Legend says that any girl who gets pregnant after a night of party with a U.S. Navy sailor names her child with the name tag his theoretical father had, and that tag says U.S. Navy, hence the name Usnavi. If that is actually true, that's really interesting. I found a Verizon bill on the ground one time. Figured I would dispose of it in case it had any important information. Guy's name was Michael Michaels. Little bit silly, but definitely memorable. Not a parent myself, but I tried to warn my friend that everyone was going to be naming their kid Jacob because of the damn Twilight movie, and she was cursing her kid to years of sharing classes with other people of the same name. Her and I both have very common names for our age group, and she agreed that it was really annoying, and she also hates those Twilight movies, but she stuck to Jacob nonetheless. Sure enough, Jacob was the #1 most common name for the year her Jacob was born. Poor baby Jacob. Poor all baby Jacobs. Don't name your baby Jacob. I think this personal vendetta for the name Jacob goes beyond the Twilight movies. My mom was going to name me Tawny, as in Tawny Kitten, or better known as the chick from that Whitesnake video. It was the late 80s and my mom was 17. She didn't go through with it because when I was born, I didn't look like a Tawny. My brother was named after Samuel Adams. No, not one of the founding fathers of the United States, but after the beer. I don't think they regret it. I just think it's interesting to share. Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm not really feeling Tawny either.
My mom wanted to name me Stuffin'. What the hell is a stuffin'?
I don't know, bro. Maybe she just thought it was cute. My wife is fortunately somewhat more sensible than me and vetoed all of my wacky name choices, so I do not have a Shamalar, nor a River, Temperance, Winfred, or a Ford. I'm still a bit sore about Winfred and River, but I do concede that she had a point with the rest in hindsight. I was allowed more leeway with the middle names, and my eldest has the middle name Neris, as in Major Kira, which would be fine except that it's spelled exactly the same as a Welsh name, which is pronounced Neris, which is entirely not what I was going for. My son's middle name is Zed, so when anyone asks him what the Z in his name stands for, he can say Zed, which I thought at the time was really cool. Then sometime thereafter I came to the conclusion that it was stupid. Now I don't know what I think. He seems to like it though. Oh, and my daughter whose middle name is Storm is afraid of thunder and lightning. That last bit is pretty cute. Also, I don't know, I think some of the names this guy comes up with sound pretty cool. Not the namer, but the named. My rents named me Andrew, but it was recorded as Adnru. Apparently, my mother noticed soon after, but didn't actually care. She then lost my birth certificate, so I never knew. I found out when I got it replaced trying to get my license. I had to file court papers and everything to get it changed, and she thought the whole thing was hilarious. So no, my parents didn't regret anything. This has got me paranoid about my own birth certificate now. I'm an Andrea and I'm a guy. The half-Italian explains it. Didn't help growing up in West Virginia. Hey, that's a girl's name. Not in Italy, I explain over and over. I never had much of a nickname, but I'm pretty sure it's really stunted my life. People can't remember it or they say it wrong because they just don't believe it. It's definitely a big problem. Not as much as I live in New York City, but still doesn't help. What was she thinking? She's only third generation, too. She should know naming a boy a common girl's name in West Virginia was an awful idea. I know I keep alluding to my name and stuff, and this isn't about me, but I also suffered with people insulting me and telling me that I had a girl's name or likening my name to a girl's name. So yeah, this one kind of hits home for me. I know a guy whose name is Tony, but it is spelled Toe-Knee. That is so freaking dumb. No, that's the worst name. That's the worst name. For a smidgen of context for those of you who maybe don't understand, their name is spelled Toeknee. It's dumb. That's so dumb. My dad wanted to change my name when I was about 6 months old because everyone at work was giving him so much crap. My mom's name is Pat. My dad's name is Rick. My name is Patrick.
Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what's the worst way you've seen someone screw over their spouse? My uncle represented this guy getting a divorce from his wife of 15 years. Super toxic breakup, and they split everything 50-50. Even the land that the house they lived in sat upon. Well, she decided to build a house right behind the other house. Mind you, this was a lot of land, probably 200 yards separating both home sites. So the back of the houses faced each other. The house gets built and my uncle gets a call from his client asking about the legality of a situation he'd gotten himself into. Apparently, his ex-wife would spend a lot of time in her backyard, so he saw her all the time. What he did was buy a female dog and name it the same name as his ex-wife. Anytime he would let his dog back in from her being outside, he would yell, "Susan, you B-word, get in here!" He would also yell if she was peeing on the flowers. "Susan, you B-word, quit peeing on the flowers!" Or, "Susan, you B-word, quit digging in the dirt!" The ex-wife called the cops on him a couple of times, but there was nothing they could do because the dog was registered under the name of Susan, and she was in fact a female dog. So there you go. The couple separated 10 years ago, but didn't officially divorce until a couple years ago. She was going to get his house, so he burned it down, then faxed her the transfer of ownership forms. He might be going to jail for arson, though. I worked at a law firm that was subpoenaed as part of a divorce between a partner at the firm and a partner at another major law firm. The woman issued more than 70 subpoenas to banks, firms, investment companies, you name it. She was convinced he had squirreled away $20+ million overseas behind her back. It got so bad that she dug up receipts from 25 years ago to try to put together his grand conspiracy puzzle. In the end, after she racked up $1.5 million in legal fees and 7 different lawyers, the judge said that this is ridiculous. There was no conspiracy, and you're not entitled to a portion of this phantom $20 million. Mind you, this was a major law firm partner who was acting this way. She made millions per year in her career, but she apparently lost her mind. Bad separation. Wife filed a restraining order on the husband. Very common. Wasn't a terrible guy, but not great either. A year into the divorce, his mother was dying. He asked his sister to speak with his ex-wife and asked to bring the kids to see her in the hospital before she died. The wife never did. Instead, she went to the court and said he violated the restraining order by trying to contact her. You can't contact someone through another party. He admitted to it and explained the situation, but was found in breach of the order. His mother died while he was locked up, and the wife never brought the kids to see her. Story from my parents who are lawyers. So, throughout the divorce proceedings, there was a car that was a huge point of contention between the husband and wife. After months and months of saying he would never let the wife have the car, the husband concedes in exchange for something great, like one of their summer houses. It turns out he'd been driving the car for 3 hours every day in a big loop around the city, putting thousands and thousands of miles on it, basically making it worthless. The amount of planning and spite that went into that was amazing. I did some consulting work for 2 divorce attorneys when I was in grad school. Their client was a career airline pilot. His wife worked part-time, so there was a huge income disparity. It was an ugly divorce. During the process, but before the final decree, tax time rolled around. The wife's attorney calls my guys and says, her accountant just called. If they can just share their W-2s and file jointly, they each stand to save about $8,000 over filing separately. My guys took that info to the husband. He says, screw her. Losing $8,000 is going to be way worse for her than it will for me. Cold as ice, man. Over here in the Netherlands, most legal costs are paid for by the government if your income is below a certain threshold. In practice, this means that if one of the spouses in a divorce has little to no income and the other one has a normal income, the one with the normal income will have to pay a lot if the process drags on. Considering there are plenty of ways to drag it on, I've seen cases approach ridiculous amounts of billable hours. There is a catch to this, however. Your lawyer is paid a set amount if he or she is paid by the government. However, should the money you receive after a divorce or whatever exceed a certain number, you're expected to pay your own lawyer, which is the reason we still keep track of the hours in these cases. So this one woman who thought she was screwing over her ex-husband by dragging the divorce over multiple years got a payout of 40,000 euros by the end of it. Unfortunately for her, she had to surrender most of that straight back in lawyer costs. There was a certain sense of justice in there. Also proves time and again that when there is conflict, the only true winners are usually the lawyers. Banker here. Had heaps of situations where joint overdraft/credit card comes up just before the divorce to absolutely surprise one of the parties. Drained down to zero, of course. Especially bad when it's students or young kids who find themselves heartbroken after the breakup and with debt they can't afford. I had a guy who was married to a woman who slept with another guy, had that other guy's baby, and never told the husband. Then, for other reasons, they start filing divorce proceedings. A paternity test is done, the husband finds out the kid isn't his, and the courts rule that he still has to pay child support because it's in the best interests of the kid. I handled a divorce between a wife who was a teacher and a husband who was a CVS cashier. I represented the wife. For all intents and purposes, the wife was the breadwinner of the family, and she supported herself, her husband, and their 2 children. I should note, one of the children was severely autistic and required intensive and expensive rehab and education. During the process of the divorce, the husband, living alone, sued the wife, caring for both children, for temporary spousal support. He met all the statutory guidelines to receive it, but it just came off as slimy. At the day of the hearing, the judge reviewed all of the facts and spent 20 minutes tearing the husband a new one. He called him a vile creature that was everything wrong with society. The judge then told us that his hands were tied and that he was forced to grant the spousal support, but he let everyone know how little he thought of the husband. As we were leaving the court, the husband just kept saying to my crying client, "Just like Goodfellas, screw you, pay me." It was literally humanity at its worst. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but being a banker, I get to delve into the personal lives of people, and this is what a customer had told me. Well, basically, the divorce was cut and dry, but as a professional, that's not my business why. But I'm worried about his financials though. My guy was the breadwinner in the house. He was a construction foreman, I believe, so he was the guy planning, paying, and watching his employees. He was great. Apparently, his wife wanted everything. But the thing that ticked him off the most was the fact that she took the boat. His boat that he had purchased before ever meeting her. The funny thing is though, she can't afford anything to move the boat with, like a truck. So he had to legitimately move his boat with his truck to some place she was staying at and just leave it. He lost his boat. He asked me at the end how old I was. I tell him 21. He told me never to get married. I'll get to keep all my stuff at the end. I saw a future ex-wife fight vigorously over disability benefits of a not yet retired career military guy. She had a new guy to bankroll her and legal fees were nothing to her. So she dragged out asset division and divorce proceedings for months over not yet accrued disability benefits of her soon-to-be ex-husband. Total amount to which she would have been entitled? About $400. That is before Supreme Court decided disability benefits are not marital property. It was some very petty bull. Wife and husband number 1 divorce with a child. Wife gets custody of child. Husband number 1 pays child support. Wife marries husband number 2. Husband number 2 adopts the child. Husband number 1 is no longer on the hook for child support as husband number 2 is now legally the father. Wife and husband number 2 get a divorce. Because of the adoption, husband number 2 has to pay child support for the child. Wife remarries husband number 1. Now the child lives with husband number 1, the biological father, and husband number 2, the adoptive father, still has to pay child support. My wife is a divorce attorney, so she told me about this one. The couple was still living together during the divorce process, but separate bedrooms and all that. Anytime the husband would buy a snack like chips or crackers, he'd come home to his soon-to-be ex-wife, who would smash the bag until the snack was dust but never open it. So anytime he'd go to eat a snack that he thought was new, he'd only end up disappointed. He was not awarded a restraining order or anything for this either. He was super mad about the dust snacks, however. I was a clerk of the court and we handled a lot of divorce files. You wouldn't believe how many people submit nude pictures of their soon-to-be exes into court to record as evidence. Not because the pictures are relevant in any way to divorce proceedings, but simply to humiliate them. Court files, unless sealed by the judge, are public record, so anyone who cares to look can access the court file and all the exhibits. Family court is the most depressing division. Don't send nudes to people. The husband cheated on his wife and she found out. One day she went back to their old house and put shrimp in all the curtain rods. The husband, who was trying to sell the house, couldn't figure out where the smell was coming from. He ends up selling it at a massive loss and below value due to the smell. The wife was the one who ended up buying it. The husband was a pretty good dude, as he was a good dad to the kids and was a good provider for the family. He wanted to get the divorce over with as amicably as possible, but the wife, who had actually cheated on him, wanted everything, including the guy's soul apparently. She got the house, custody of the kids, and alimony, but they both ended up racking up thousands of extra dollars in attorney's fees over a vase and a journal. Both items belonged to the husband's grandmother, and were her only possessions that made it through the Holocaust before she immigrated to the US. The judge ended up ruling that the wife got possession of those items too. As soon as she got her hands on them, she smashed the vase with a hammer and burned the journal. She left the pieces of the vase and the ashes of the journal at the doorway of his one-bedroom apartment he had been financially forced to move into. I did some work for the attorney on this case. Local investment broker who's done well. Strong practice and very affluent client base. Wife owns a small shop in the local community. A pet pastime. Doesn't really turn profit. Been trying to get pregnant for a couple of years. working with reproductive doctors and clinics. Wife finally gets pregnant, 1 in a million chance, has the baby, and it's a boy. Fast forward a couple of months. The wife has to go to the market for her shop and takes a day trip to the big city a couple of hours away. The husband prepared for this and takes the opportunity to have the baby tested for paternity, not his. When they started at the fertility clinic, he was tested and knew he was shooting blanks. So he contacts his attorney, my boss, and we start the plan. While we're preparing the case, we have a PI follow his wife. He follows her to a few doctor visits, tennis lessons, lunch at the country club daily, and hanging out with her friends. Her friends decide to throw her a birthday party at the country club. This is our opportunity. I serve her the divorce papers, loudly asking her name, and after confirming, announce the reason for the divorce: infidelity. You are hereby ordered to appear in the blank county court, blah blah blah. Her friends are stunned. Discovery reveals that she and her friends are all cheating in the same circles. We go to court and present evidence showing the husband is not the father and request to have his name removed from the birth certificate. The judge, not wanting the child to become a ward of the state, orders her to produce a list of all the people she slept with during the reasonable window of conception. She provides the list. During the next court appearance, 10 men show up running the full gamut of personalities. 1 doctor, 1 architect, a tennis coach, 2 chefs, 1 trust fund prince, and a few others to round out the mix. 1 was actually the father of the person they really needed, but when she said John Doe, she didn't specify John Doe Jr. All were ordered to take a DNA test. Our client succeeds in getting his name removed from the birth certificate, no child support, and no alimony. Wife strikes a deal with the baby daddy for child support and support payments for a number of years. She does end up winning. It was the doctor. Part of the agreement is she has to move from the area, paid for by the doctor. NDA signed. The doctor was very rich and must protect his name and reputation. The court allowed no dad on the birth certificate because of guaranteed support for the child, a trust fund. The wife was at work when the husband closed on their house, but he took his mom and she signed the papers. Years later, they divorce and wife demands the house, but gets an eviction notice from the mom. Wife had no idea they'd been paying rent. I was approached to handle a post-divorce enforcement proceeding. The guy was owed somewhere in the neighborhood of like $5,000, which hadn't been paid in a few years and was already reduced to judgment. He reached out because he found some money she was squirreling away and he wanted the judgment enforced against it. The money was funds raised through a firehouse benefit dinner which was held for cancer treatments because she was uninsured. I declined. I had an epic client who hated his wife's guts. He was asked to pay an interim maintenance of rupees, $3,000 per month. This guy goes to the bank and gets $3,000, all in 1 rupee coins, and gives it to his wife in court. Technically, it's legal, so the wife had to sit and count all the coins in court, and then he says he wants the bag back. Technically, it's his bag. So this lady is left with 3,000 coins and no way to carry it home. This guy was an evil genius. I used to be a paralegal, but not a lawyer. I remember reading about one case that I couldn't remember the name of when I went to look for it. The parties had about $15 million in assets, and the husband had owned about 90% of the assets going into the marriage. The courts wanted to award the wife about $2 million and give the husband the rest, and the husband wanted to leave her destitute. He ended up spending all of his money to fight at every step of the way by filing frivolous motions and just generally doing whatever he could to be a jerk. After attorney fees, penalties and costs and money wasted on schemes, the total remaining assets the parties had was about $500K. The courts awarded all of it to the wife and left him completely broke. Guy wins lottery big time. Millions. Never tells his wife. Technically, half belongs to her. Taxes already taken, so he just needs to note it in tax forms, which wife always signs without looking. Divorce. Husband offers no hassle. Generous divorce settlement, which her lawyer advises her to take. He moves to a nearby town and lives normally, gradually losing touch with everyone who knows him. Then he moves again, losing touch with everyone. That's when he starts spending the dough. This one's a bit of a story, but here it goes. The guy lives on his family farm all his life. His mother lives with him, but the father had already passed away. One day, his mom says he should get a wife as he starts getting a bit older himself. He finds someone online. She has a teenage daughter already, but whatever. Things move along and they're all living together on the farm. He does the farming and decides to let her handle the books. The wife then sees how much money this guy's actually got and starts spending a lot of it. Sends the daughter to private schools, starts buying expensive things, etc., etc. But she doesn't pay the farm's bills. The land was still on mortgage. He finds out because he gets a call from the bank saying that he's past due and nothing's been paid. He ends up losing the farm. He gets into a big argument with his wife. They split up. She gets him and his mother kicked out of the house, even though it was their house to begin with. So he leaves to the city. He doesn't like it. After all, he was farming out in the country all his life. So he calls up his friend, asks if he can come back to town and stay at his place. Friend says sure. He arrives at his friend's house. The friend isn't there. Instead, he finds his ex-wife and her daughter. He snapped. He took a gun from his vehicle and shot and killed them both. I've got a few stories from my husband who's an attorney. A man had been assaulting his 5-year-old daughter and the wife found out about it, left him and filed for custody. The vindictive SOB accused his wife of assaulting the daughter just so she wouldn't get custody either. The girl went to his wife's parents and suddenly the husband remembers that the wife's parents also assaulted her too. Again, all this just so that the wife wouldn't get custody. The girl ended up in foster care for a whole year while the investigations went on, and the wife and her parents were cleared. The father served time and is now allowed supervised visits. Then there was a woman who was married to a man who sold guns for a living and loved hunting more than anything. She accused him of domestic violence because she knew he would no longer be allowed to own or carry guns. Next, a woman in the middle of a divorce invited her soon-to-be ex to reconnect, seduced him, and offered him alcohol, then threw him out of the house. She called the cops and reported seeing someone swerving on the road. He was arrested, taken to jail, and lost his job because of the DUI. His job involved driving. Lastly, a man told his wife that he would give up custody of their twin daughters if she agreed not to go after spousal support or ask to split any assets. She agreed and the divorce was finalized. The day the papers were signed, he went after full custody of the twins, saying that he could take better care of them because he had a big house and she only had an apartment, and he made more money and things like that. Just to leave her with as little as possible, he told his attorney. When the judge wouldn't grant him custody because of their previous arrangement, he went after one of them and permanently split up the twins. So many stories, but generally the cases that sickened me the most went like this. Wife has baby. Husband has zero interest in child and even resents the attention that the child takes away from him. Tells wife that she is 100% responsible for this child, even financially. Wife realizes that husband is a jerk parent and that makes him a jerk partner. She would actually rather be a single parent than deal with his man-baby nonsense. Divorce petition is filed. The husband is told by his lawyer that the more time he has with his kid, the less child support he'll have to pay. The husband starts going to doctor appointments, doing stuff with the child, and, being a parent. The parties are now divorced. Husband has a 50-50 timeshare and is a doting father. All wife wanted was for husband to take an interest in the child, but she had to divorce him to get it. I had this case while working as a law clerk. The husband had a fancy job and got stationed abroad, so the wife and 2 kids moved with him. He got a really high salary, all expenses paid, while the wife was a stay-at-home mom with no income of her own. The marriage ended up failing and they moved back home to Sweden, and the wife sued for alimony, which she was entitled to by law, so she would be able to take care of the kids every other week. She hadn't worked for a number of years and had a hard time getting back into the job market, no savings, etc. Suddenly, the husband, who basically hadn't had to pay any bills for several years, claimed he was also broke. He only had around $1 million or so and was forced to spend it on an apartment in one of the most expensive parts of town so he had somewhere to live. People who quit a job in the heat of the moment, what chaos did you leave them to handle? I didn't get a bonus because they felt the overtime I did paid me more than the bonus they gave to everyone else. I didn't know what to say after that, so after a few hours, I offered to get coffee for everyone. I left and never came back or contacted them again. I keep thinking that I should go back with coffee now that I've been gone for 10 years and just act normal. When I was a programmer at an insurance company, one of the longtime programmers had been with the company for nearly 20 years. This guy originally wrote most of the financial system himself, from scratch, and had maintained it with the help of a couple other people. Every month he did the month-end processing, and every quarter he did the quarter-end processing. Every year-end? Yep, it was him. There was a change in management a couple of times, and he kept getting treated worse and worse. He was being treated unfairly, asked to do unreasonably more work than he was already doing, getting thrown under the bus, that kind of thing. He finally had enough, and one morning he came in, walked to the manager's office and quit, then walked out the door. In the aftermath, it took a team of 4 other people months and months to get things back together and to a point where things were serviceable. I got stabbed in the shoulder while working as a bookmaker, or betting shop manager. I was the only key holder, and while the paramedics were tending to me, the area manager was on the phone asking me to open the store the next day. I closed shop for the day, came back once I got out of the hospital, put my keys in the safe, and left my notice on the desk. The store didn't open for 3 days while they sorted a field manager. I worked for a landscape company doing new installs. Our owner was cheap with a bad habit of constantly biting off more than he could chew. One year, he asked if we wanted any part of a school project in a city we didn't live in, over 2 hours away, and we said no. He said that was fine and would just bid on one school for his crew who lived in that area. Instead, he bid on multiple schools and got 3 of them. Obviously, none of us are happy about this, and he claimed that he'd put us up in hotels so we wouldn't have to commute. He never did. The work itself sucked, way more than a crew our size could handle, and the owner's brother did absolutely nothing. He was supposed to be the project manager / supervisor, but literally all he did was play Clash of Clans on his phone and yell at people about not being fast enough. After a few days, I was done. I'd grown sick of the job anyway, but this project really sealed the deal. Having to commute 4+ hours a day and then physically destroy myself was taking a toll fast. I woke up Friday morning, called the owner, told him I quit and to stop taking more work than he can manage. He blew up, but I just hung up the phone and went back to sleep. 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. He's begging me to come back because after I quit, 2 other guys did too. The project is now woefully behind schedule and he's going to get fined if things don't pick up and get finished. I told him he should have thought of that before he bit off more than he could chew and expected a small crew to do it all in a short time frame. He got quiet and then asked if a 50-cent raise would get me back. No, that was the last time I ever heard from him, and I can't find his company website anymore. I was an 18-year-old assistant manager at a big pizza franchise. I'd been working open to close for 2 weeks straight because the new GM went on vacation right after taking over the store. When she got back from her vacation, she only worked a half day. I opened and still closed. Then she changed the schedule and took 2 days off. This was the last straw on top of a ton of other crap piled over a year. Multiple new GMs, crappy district manager, awful store politics. I was alone during an unusually large lunch rush and was just done with everyone's crap. I had a make line full of orders, phones ringing, oven full of pizza, orders to be picked up, and a massive bunch of dough sitting on the prep table. I said screw it. I shut the oven off, walked out, and locked the door. Didn't call anyone to let them know. It would be hours before the evening driver would roll in. No prep for the day, no dough for the day except for the blob I'm sure would become a massive mess after rising for hours. A double-deck oven with both belts full of pies wasted and what was probably shaping to be a $1,200 lunch out the window. I hope she was well rested after her time off. Shoppers Drug Mart. I had simply asked for better hours after working ridiculous late night hours for over a year. Instead, they hired a new guy and gave him the exact hours I asked for and then had me train him. So when training wasn't going very well because the new guy was super slow, they blamed me for it. Now, I had a good standing with everyone at this store, but I didn't need shoppers, and I let a lot of crap slide every day. So again, when I asked for vacation that I deserved because I was never sick and punctual as heck, I was denied it. And the next day, the manager had 4 weeks of vacation set. So to make it up to me, they offered me all these insane overtime shifts for the next 3 weeks. So I waited for the frozen deliveries to arrive that same day. The boss was packing up to go home, and when he said goodnight to me, I said, "But who's gonna do this frozen delivery?" He laughed and said, "You are." So I replied, "Nope. nope. And he became super cross, so I started laughing. What are you laughing about? He says. So I said, screw you, I quit. Now there was no one to finish the night shift. He immediately asks for the uniform. I said, no, screw you, I quit. I had never done that before or since. Uniform went in the trash. I always worked the close shift at a fast food joint. My managers loved to hand out citations for any little thing. The policy was 3 strikes and you're out. I had 2 strikes and was told to clean up the entire front end and bathroom in an hour or risk getting a 3rd strike. To put things in perspective, I had to close the register, count the money, clean up the front end, restock everything, sweep and mop the floors, and clean the entire bathroom, including the toilets, for basically $8.05. I walked into the bathroom just to see what to expect. It looked like someone had finished projectile pooping all over the toilet and then decided to pee next to the sink. I knew I wouldn't be able to do everything in an hour, and that I would get fired regardless. So I took my uniform off and walked home shirtless. I worked as an engineer at the mill and was responsible for operation and process adjustment of certain pieces of equipment. I was able to make it work better than specified results, but my managers required more production, less power, etc. So at this point, the machines reached its capacity, and further pushing it was risky and a huge amount of investment was needed. I was told by the higher-ups that, "You didn't even try to do it, only said some lame excuses." I was done with this and called to the manufacturer of this equipment. Long story short, instead of instructions and advice, they sent me a job offer for local service rep. After I quit the mill, my ex-colleagues tried to push the machine above the limits and successfully broke it and stopped the production for a couple of weeks. I worked as a small engine repair tech for a larger company. I'm also in the National Guard. I had gotten hurt and needed physical therapy, and 1 or 2 days a month I would have to miss because of an extended drill weekend. Well, my boss didn't like that, and she decided that she would punish me by making me stay later than everyone else. She was punishing me for going to physical therapy for a workplace injury and for being a soldier. Now, you may be thinking, having to stay late to keep up on your work doesn't sound like that much of a punishment. Normally, you would be right, but trust me, she was doing a lot more to make sure it was a punishment. Well, one day after being told I was not given approval for the 1 day of vacation I had asked for 3 months in advance to go see the eclipse and generally being treated like a slave, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And clocked out at the end of my shift. That next Monday after drill weekend, I showed up, packed up all my tools, and took off. My boss started freaking out when she saw what I was doing. I left and found out that me leaving cost her over $100,000 because she had to ship my workload to another state to get another shop to work on them. That meant she needed to pay to ship them and then pay to ship them back. And since her shop didn't do any of the actual work, she never saw any money for any of the repairs. It was like 80 riding lawnmowers. I had a job as a fairly niche field service engineer in IT. Started off covering my local area, which was fine. Maybe an hour traveling time to my most remote site tops. Then they lost an engineer in my adjacent territory, and I had to cover that too. This put my travel time up to about 2.5 hours each way. That wasn't great, but it was temporary, allegedly. Then they lost another engineer, and guess what? I had to cover that area too. That meant I was having to do up to 4 hours driving each way just to get to a site. And then they expected me to put in a full 8-hour day. I mentioned this to my manager and pointed out that if I was pulling multi-day jobs at a site 4 hours away, it would be far better for them to put me up in a hotel. But they said, nah, as it was unusual for me to do multi-day installs. Anyway, a month or so later, I was expected to put in a complete new system at a site, spec'd up to 4 full days to do it. High-profile client, and I basically told my manager I needed a hotel. They pushed back. It's only 4 days, you'll be fine. Just charge them the travel time as worked hours. Which is fine, but I was salaried, and they were the ones invoicing the client, so no overtime for me. Anyway, on the second day, I arrived at nearly lunchtime after a massive accident on the motorway held me up for 4 hours, and was greeted by the client chewing me out. I thought, screw this, packed my tools, left the site with their old system ripped out, and a pile of unopened boxes of new kit, switched switched off my mobile and drove to the head office. I parked close enough to the main entrance that the car operated the automatic doors, went into reception and told the receptionist, very politely, it wasn't her fault, that I quit. All my gear was in the car and here are my keys, phone, and pass. Then walked out and got a cab home. I found out from a friend that they lost that client, which was one of their main ones, even after my manager basically spent the rest of the week installing the kit on his own without any documentation, since I'd written the spec and accidentally kept it. I spent some time working at a gas station where my supervisor would take about 20 smoke breaks a day while demanding that the rest of us work harder. After several days of this and my boss not doing anything about it, I quit in the middle of a pizza order rush. Oh boy, let me tell you about my last day of Walmart. It's Monday morning, my day off, and I was pulling out of my doctor's office after getting blood work done when I receive a call from my manager. Let's just call her Demon Queen. Demon Queen asks me to come into work because of 2 call-offs. Thinking that I didn't have anything else planned and could use the overtime, I agreed. I informed her over the phone it would take me an hour to get home, dress, and drive to work. All I heard from her was an annoyed, "Fine, just get here." 1 hour later, I arrived at work. Just as I was getting to the deli where I work, my manager, who was behind the counter by herself, starts yelling at me for being late, in front of not 1, not 2, but a line of customers. I attempt to remind her of our conversation, but she cuts me off, tosses her apron, and storms out of the deli. I'm forced to shrug it off, apologize to the customers, and get to work. Later, I have a customer walk to the deli and ask about our rotisserie chicken, something not uncommon. I explain it'll be over an hour before they're ready, and suggest driving 5 minutes north to the other Walmart. He nods, thanks me, and walks away towards the front. I thought nothing of it, and continued to cook popcorn chicken. 5 minutes later, the same customer comes back with none other than the Demon Queen herself, who's asking me about the rotisserie chicken. I once again attempt to explain how long the chicken has left to cook and the suggestion I made. No sooner am I finished speaking than she berates me for being lazy and telling a customer to go elsewhere. I ask what else is there I could do, as I couldn't make the oven cook faster. Her next words stick to this day. "I want you to do your job or you can kiss it goodbye." A moment of pause from everyone. Zoe and May have been listening in the entire time, as well as the customers they were helping. I ponder, then smile. Okay. I apologize to Zoe and May, wish them the best of luck, and walk out of the deli towards my manager. I stop in front of her, take off my apron, kiss it, say goodbye, and walk out of the store. I still have my name badge and hat to this day. I worked 25 years for a large company in the sales division. I was making 6 figures and had earned my role as VP of the West Coast. My plan was to stick around to retirement, but then we got a new president, and the new president was a jerk to everyone. I saw one sales guy walk up all excited and offer a handshake to meet him. The president didn't shake the extended hand, and instead said, "I can't believe you came here without polishing your shoes." The president gave a directive for me to stop hiring people with business or sales experience and to just start hiring attractive men and women, because in his words, "Their good looks will sell product better than the educated words of a veteran salesperson. Plus, they're young and work cheaper." I went along with this request and made 2 such hires. Then the next request came along. "Tell me who is the worst member of your team right now." I explained that my team was number 1 in the company and that we're all doing well. But the weakest one would have to be one 8-year employee who had had a bad year last year. He was making less frequent calls and the quality of calls was dropping. I had to place him on PIP to improve in 3 months. And he did. He busted his butt, worked long hours and weekends, and moved into the number 1 spot on my team. At the end of the 3 months, the president calls me to discuss the PIP. I explain the great progress and that I want to release him from the PIP because he's on track now. The reply was, "Well, there's probably other things wrong with him anyway, so terminate him and document it. Make sure to hire a young, attractive person as a replacement." I quit on the spot with 0 days notice. Unusual for a white-collar job, and told him to do his own dirty work. Now I work as a high school teacher. I worked in shipping and receiving for a health food store. Over the past 5 days, everyone else had quit, including supervisors and department heads. I was working a frozen shipment, my regular job. Dairy came in and cheese came in, a little bit over $130,000. Huge fancy cheese and whole wheels, a large generally organic dairy shipment. I refused to sign anything. GM demanded I sign and put it away. Signing was already out of my pay grade. Those numbers made it way out of my pay grade. He then demanded I put it all away. It would have taken the rest of the shift for my own work. I just quit. Screw it. I heard that he signed it and it all went to waste. He ended up getting fired. I've only done this once in my life, but it was a really crazy situation. My first professional job was an event planner for a small business, like 3 people. I was 24 and I worked there for a year. After about 5 months, my boss became extremely abusive. She would make snide little remarks about my terrible skills or time management or organizing. She stopped talking to me and would basically act like I wasn't there unless it was to criticize me for something. One day, she asked me if I implemented a new filing system she had learned from the bank she used to work at. I replied no, as she hadn't yet shown me how to do so. She said, with a stack of papers in her hand, "Well, I guess giving you these would just be useless then." Another example is that she would find little ways in which I was being pert or snide in some way, usually something completely BS, and would make me sign forms saying we had meetings about my behavior and listed all the things we would do to change it and help me grow. Like I worked for a big corporation or something with an HR department, not a private office with literally one boss. If I argued why I wasn't doing so, she made me sign something saying I was refusing training. I literally have no idea who those papers were for. Things like that. It made me so paranoid and unhappy, I spent many lunches crying in my car, and many nights completely stressed out after work. I couldn't understand what had changed, and felt so stupid and helpless. My coworker had just left, so it was just the 2 of us, and I gave my 2 weeks because the thought of being alone in an office with her was unbearable. As soon as I left her office, she called her mom to complain about me ditching her and talked about how happy she would be with me gone, all while I was about 10 feet away in another room with the doors open. I lost it, got up from my desk and grabbed my purse, went to her office and told her I was leaving for good, right this minute. I was shaking and terrified, and she was furious. She told me, "Good luck finding another job in this town. I know everybody." Spoiler alert, I did. The kicker? What I didn't know at the time was that my coworker had been feeding her BS the whole time. When it started to affect how I was being treated and I would complain or talk about it, guess who also told my boss all of that? Yup, with many embellishments of course. I had 0 experience with people like that and overlooked many clues, like how she would stay after work a lot to finish her assignments, when in reality she was staying to tattle on me. I was just so new to the real world and naive. I found all of this out a few months later from one of her friends I ran into who she had also screwed over in some way. It made me stronger, and after I left, my boss had to deal with scrambling to find people to do all of her events, and I'm sure it was hell. I felt happy about that at first, but now that I'm 10 years older, I can see things differently. She definitely could have handled it better, but it was her first boss job too, and she maybe had some things to learn herself. I quit from a gaming site I used to write for. This all happened in the span of 2 months. The new owner made us writers lose all credibility by writing unedited articles on his own and posting them freely, and they were the most widely ridiculous and racist pieces I'd ever read. In one of them, he said women only bought the Wii because they used the Wii mode as a vibrator. It just made the rest of us look bad. He fired my friend simply because he didn't like him. He tried to claim my friend kept our review copy of Skyward Sword. There was more stuff that he did that I can't remember. My father died in December of that year. I informed everyone. I had also lost internet access for a while because my provider was switching the way their routers and stuff connected. I had too much going on at the time to deal with that. When I connected to the McDonald's Wi-Fi one day, I read a barrage of emails from the new owner, all amounting to, "Where are you?" and "Why aren't you writing anything?" I emailed him and CC'd everyone on the writing staff and told him he could go screw himself. 90% of the writing staff followed. 5 writers quit that day, and people took notice. The site never recovered, and today it only exists as a landing page and hub for one podcast that just refuses to die. After that, the owner took to stalking the guy who hired most of his writing staff, online harassment, and most recently, he hacked the previous owner's email and stole his Destiny 2 review code. He's still out there being a jerk, but I only hear about it since I have him blocked on all social media. What do insanely poor people buy that ordinary people know nothing about? Growing up, my family had its moments of struggle. Our public transport system at the time had tickets which were simply hole punched with the date and month, not the year. So we'd save them and store them neatly in envelopes marked by month and concession or full fare. After a few years of saving tickets, we pretty much had free train and bus travel for the next 10 years, until they changed the ticketing system to electronically stamped tickets with barcodes. My office only has a unisex bathroom, so it has the facilities for men and women. Naturally, there's a tampon machine, and tampons are only 5 cents. Once a month, I'll work late, get a roll of nickels, and fill up a grocery sack with tampons for my wife. Extended stay housing or motels/hotels. When you can't qualify to get an apartment because you don't have proof of income, you end up wasting more money to stay for a week at an extended day housing or a cheap motel. It sucks having no home and being a transient. I promise myself never to be in the same situation again. I was so poor once that I would go to Long John Silver's and order a water and crunchies, which used to be free. Then sit there and watch the people that would dine in. It was amazing how little they ate, and then they would leave without dumping their tray off in the trash. Fries, hush puppies, chicken, fish, all untouched. No, I didn't eat a piece that was bitten off of. I once saw a woman order a 2-piece fish and more for her kid that ate 1 hush puppy and a few fries, and then left the rest of it there. It was the best I had eaten in weeks. Glad that's behind me now. Lots of school systems do free lunches for kids under 18 during the summer. When I was a kid, I remember my dad taking us to get lunch at the school, then go play disc golf, soccer, or do something else free and fun. It was a blast, and I had no clue it was because we were poor. Dollar theaters, and sometimes they have a free afternoon or evening show for kids with the purchase of a parent ticket. Many movies were seen by the 3 of us for $4 with a shared popcorn and Coke. My dad was amazing at making us feel rich on basically nothing. When I was a child, Burger King ran a special kids meal where it was 2 mini burgers that were attached to each other like a weird conjoined burger experiment. Sometimes we would go. My dinner was 1.5 of the mini burgers. My mom was the half I didn't eat, and she would fill up on the free refills of soda. I've been both very poor and very comfortable. A lot of very true statements are already posted here, but here's what I haven't noticed. When you're broke, you can't plan ahead or shop sales or buy in bulk. People have to wait to buy something until they absolutely need it, so they have to pay whatever the price is at that moment. If 10 packs of paper towels are on sale for half price, that's great, but you can only afford 1 roll anyway. In this way, poor people actually pay more than others for common staple goods. Stuff on layaway. My mom would always go to this store that sold heavily discounted irregulars and put it on layaway for our new school clothes. This is actually a good question that can illustrate something. When you're poor, the system is set up to keep you that way. For example, how much do you pay to cash your paycheck? If you aren't and have never been poor, you probably said pay because you don't. Your check probably goes via direct deposit right into your checking account. But what if you have bad credit history such that you can't get a checking account? Well, now you have to pay to go to a check cashing service and pay money to get it. This means that out of your already low check, you get a few dollars less. If you're lucky, you can find a grocery store that will give your fee back and certificates to the store. But even then, they might charge you a small fee on top of that. How about this? How much is your car insurance? Did you know that if you get bad credit, it's higher? So now that you're poor, you get to pay more money for your insurance. And you'll find that the only landlord that will rent to you at a place not in the absolute worst part of town will ask you to double your deposit since you've had financial trouble in the past. It gets a lot worse. Your bad credit combined with your shaky job history and barren wasteland of a savings mean your options for transportation are severely limited. If you need a car, you'll have to go to one of those lots. Have you ever driven a car into the ground? I mean, put like 200,000 miles on it and drive it until it just doesn't want to go anymore? Then you take your jalopy into the local reputable Honda dealer and they give you $20 and a Snicker bar for it. What do you think they do with it? They certainly don't sell it at their lot, that's for sure. They aren't going to park your ridiculous hoopty next to their brand new Accords and Civics. Just being in the same vicinity of it drops their value. No, they usually have a deal with or ownership in one of those lots. Those lots are in bad parts of town. The office usually looks like a tool shed. They offer financing at rates that would make a loan shark uneasy. Their cars usually have a lot of miles and are guaranteed only to make it off the lot. Some of them will even rig up the cars with tracking devices so their repo men can find you easier. That lot will sell this hunk of junk to the kind of person who, more than anyone else, needs it to start every day and get them to work. When your car breaks down, what do? Probably take it to the shop to get it fixed. What if you had no money and no credit cards? And what if you were a week into a job in which you were as replaceable as a number 2 pencil? Well, hope you don't have any kids. At least then you might be able to call a friend or family member to help you out. If you have kids, now you have to find someone to help you drive them to your childcare provider, which you can barely afford as it is anyhow, and take you to work. Then pick you and your kids up. If you don't have kids, you can probably at least take a cab today. And then you can fall into another trap. You can get a short-term loan at 300% APR. People who have credit don't get these loans because they're predatory and sketchy. They take advantage of people who have no other options. Ordinary people may know a little bit about them, but usually just say, what kind of stupid person gets themselves into that? Without realizing that it's not a stupid option so much as a last resort for many people in poverty. When you're poor, you pay for everything. Many things that other people don't have to pay for, or just don't have to worry about. This is one of the fatal flaws of the bootstrap mentality in which fixing poverty is simply a matter of will. When you're that far down, the deck is entirely stacked against you. The world is rigged to keep poor people poor. I had to move out on my own when I was 17. I had no money at all and drove an old clunker Camry. I got a flat tire to match the flat spare in the trunk. I went to the discount tire on the east side of Indianapolis, where I was living, to see if they could patch it. When they got it on the rack, they said that the belts were showing around the tire. In fact, all of the tires. And I would have to replace all 4 tires. I thanked them, went outside, sat in my car, and started crying. The manager came out and knocked on the window. He said that he had a set of tires that would fit my wheels that someone had left when they got new tires. I told him, thanks, but I didn't have any money. He told me not to worry about it and when I graduate to come back and buy my tires from them. You can get new car parts from the junkyard for virtually nothing, with added discounts if you remove them from the junkers yourself. I had a 12-year-old car in college, and when it blew a tire, I went to the junkyard and found a decent set of tires. I bought all 4 for $70, which reduced my food budget to $16 for the next 2 weeks. Some lady in the grocery store saw me with a calculator trying to figure out how much ramen I could buy with $16 and handed me a $20. It made me cry. I'm glad I'm not poor anymore, but I'll always remember that lady. The first 4 years of my life were spent in abject poverty. As a child, I would ask my mom if we could get a candy bar. She would explain to me at age 3 that we could get the candy bar, but if we did, it meant we couldn't afford a 2-liter of Coca-Cola. She would phrase it like so: if you get the candy bar, it'll be gone in a few days, but if you get the Coca-Cola, we can have Coca-Cola for a whole week. Amazingly, I knew enough to understand that Coca-Cola for over a week was a better deal than 2 days of a candy bar. As a side effect, I was regularly told no when I asked for things I wanted, mostly Lego sets or He-Man toys. Around age 6, my father's stake in a mineral prospecting company finally paid off. Turns out he had been putting every dime he had into it since before I was born. We went from surviving on mayonnaise sandwiches to having 2015's equivalent of $10,300 per month in income. My little sister was around 2 or so at this time, and she was getting everything she wanted. For the first 6 years of my life, I had learned that asking for things I wanted would always end with no, so I never asked for anything. My parents weren't able to put it together until my grandmother got very sick and came to live with us. The whole family went out shopping, and my grandmother knew I loved Legos, but I didn't ask for a set of them. Meanwhile, my little sister had a Barbie doll and a My Little Pony in each hand. She stopped and asked me, "Poster, don't you want a Lego set?" Mommy and Daddy always tell me, "No, Grandma, we can't afford them." I only have a vague memory of this, but before she died, my grandmother told me this story and said that my mom broke down in tears in the middle of the store, sobbing. My dad had a look of defeated failure on his face, according to her. Apparently, it simply never occurred to them the reason I never asked for anything was because I had always been told no. For Christmas, I got 3 Lego Technic sets. It's not the things we bought. I grew up in a level of poverty in the entire 1980s and some of the 1990s that modern politicians will swear to you doesn't occur in modern America. After all, we have food stamps and welfare, and anyone still poor after that is obviously just a lazy addict bum. It's not the things we bought. We lived on powdered milk and rice and ramen, and before that, old wonton soup packets that I just realized don't exist anymore, and government cheese, and bread from the discount rack at the local bakery, about 9 minutes away from growing mold. But hey, at least it was only 19 cents a loaf. It's the things we scavenged. Hauling food out of the dumpster at 7-Eleven because they threw away piles of chip bags that were a day over their expiration. The manager caught us one day and they apparently told the employees to stab a hole in each chip bag after that. Eventually, we just had to sniff each bag to make sure nothing was contaminated. We would check neighbors' trash bins as well, rescuing half a pizza some idiots had ordered the night before then threw away after a handful of slices. We would haul in furniture from alleyways. My youngest sibling, my sister, received a twin bed mattress that had a grotesque brown stain on it. It looked like someone had pooped a gallon of wet feces onto it. We didn't care though. We scrubbed that down with bleach over and over and she slept on it for years. And then there were times when the welfare checks or food stamps didn't arrive, and the trash bins were not producing food. I grew up in a fairly rural area, and what did we do when that happened? Well, I know that in the winter, gray squirrel tastes pretty gross. Sure, people from the south can claim that their brown and red squirrels are delicious, but I would rather eat poop out of a pig's butt than eat another bite of squirrel meat, or jackrabbit, or dandelion greens. I guess I'm just saying that it's not what insanely poor people buy since they're insanely poor. They can't afford to buy anything. You can keep the electricity and rent paid, or you can, nope, there's not another choice. Food, medicine, clothing, furnishings, blankets, all of this is stuff you can pull out of the garbage. Powdered milk. I once worked in a call center, and an old lady called almost in tears that cable went up by $1.50. Her line that she repeated more than once was that she couldn't afford fresh milk and had to buy powdered milk. Unless it's due to a lack of refrigeration available or some sort of allergy, only the very poor would buy powdered over fresh milk. I knew a guy who, when he would get sick, would go to a livestock feed store and buy antibiotics and other meds that were meant for farm animals. There was another med he'd get at pet stores too. He would just cut the pills into smaller pieces and try to guess what the proper milligram amount was. It's apparently crazy cheap for certain meds, and doesn't require a prescription or government oversight like it would at a normal pharmacy. I had a really odd childhood. Until age 9, my family would have been classed as upper middle class. Then my father left and my mom just went crazy. From 9 to 18, we were dirt poor. I remember being 10 years old and our weekly treat was to go to the Little Woods Cafe, and they did a 99 pence 5-piece breakfast. We shared that among my mum, brother, sister, and me. One of us got the extra item. We'd take turns. As an adult, I've made sure my children will never know poverty because of excellent memories like that. Nothing motivates you more than memories of fighting over a solitary sausage. A buddy of mine went through a tough time a few years back, and I didn't know about it until he told me about a year ago. One thing that stuck with me was that he just made enough money to survive. By survive, I meant literally enough money to pay rent, utilities, and the cheapest, worst food he could buy. He couldn't afford transportation, not even the bus. He told me about a span of a few months he went through where he literally only ate water, dry noodles, and peanut butter for a few months. He worked at a restaurant and they'd cut his hours. He couldn't find other work. His first big reality check was that he had to sell his car to make rent one month. The next month, he started selling other unnecessary items, like his old TV, some other appliances, and his nicer clothes. So he got to the point where he was literally doing his laundry with dish soap in his sink. He couldn't afford deodorant, razors, or any of the things that we take for granted, so he'd steal them from the grocery store. He didn't like to do it, but he had no choice. He never got caught. When he told me all of this, I was floored. I wish he would have told me when it was happening. I would have helped any way I could. At that time, I was by no means living a fancy lifestyle, but I could have thrown him a 20 here and there to help him put some groceries in the house or some TP in the bathroom. In university, I used to buy 10 to 20 pound bags of potatoes, freeze-dried chives, and gravy mix in bulk. Not the supermarket packs which are $1 for 2 cups of gravy. Restaurant-sized packs that make 8 liters. That was often dinner, usually at the end of the month when money got tight. Sometimes I had even saved enough that I could have mashed potatoes with some sort of dairy or bacon grease. I also had a cheap tub of protein powder for weightlifters, and it was gross. But I would blend it up, usually with water, and hold my nose and gulp it down. It was actual protein, and slightly more healthy than a week-long diet of potatoes. Learning the times of the day when meat, bakery, fish, vegetable, and miscellaneous items are reduced to 75% off at the local supermarket. I've been learning this for years, but it's a good day when you find 400 grams of fresh mince for 99 pence, and you have a warm filling food that you used to take for granted when living with parents. One thing I've noticed about being poor is that you become almost vegetarian because meat just costs too much, fresh or frozen. Another thing would be buying the cheapest large container of yogurt and mixing it in jam for fruity yogurt. But that's not about being poor, that's just a good idea. At-home surgery. Used a pair of needle nose pliers, a razor blade, and some antiseptic superglue to remove a cyst on my forehead. The secret is to cut in a cat's eye shape, quickly push the skin back after you pull the cyst out, don't let it pop, and get the glue on fast. It hurts a lot, but it bleeds a lot and you have to get it on quick to stop the bleeding. Bags of frozen veggies and a couple packets of ramen can make a family meal. I used to buy these awful frozen chicken discs wrapped in bacon. They were terrible, filled with gristle and just nasty. Eating those with rice and frozen corn was a real treat. I ate mac and cheese every day for about 2 to 3 years because that was all I could cook while my mom worked. I could have made SpaghettiOs, but I hated those. That for dinner, and one of those cheap 99-cent packed donuts from the grocery store for breakfast. Lunch was a bologna sandwich and an apple. Finally, when I was about 10 or 11, I started teaching myself how to cook from my mom's old cookbook, so my meals got a lot better. All carbs and cheap fats, scalloped potatoes, rice, and cheap meats. My local bus service used to have paper transfers, so you'd pay your fare, get the paper transfer that was good for an hour, and then you'd use it for the next bus. But if you were only going to the station, you'd get a paper transfer anyway, then hang around the station for an extra 5 minutes to see if anyone needed it. Conversely, you'd wait around for people getting off the bus to see if you could score someone's transfer. This only worked if you weren't switching buses. But I got quite a few free rides this way, and gave many transfers away. Also, going without meds, living in constant pain because you can't afford a prescription. I remember laying in my bed at night, and my mom would be sobbing in her bed from pain because she couldn't afford the meds that would treat her rheumatoid arthritis or anything but generic Tylenol for her pain. I guess that's not really buying anything, but while we're on memory lane, there was also saving your birthday money from your grandma and aunts and uncles, so you could pay for a babysitting course that lets you babysit at 12. Got a babysitting job at 12 and babysat every day from 3 until 7 or 8 to earn some money. I'd give that money to my dad so he can pay his phone bill and put gas in the car. I got a real job at 14, working at a fast food restaurant so I could eat dirt cheap. Still gave my dad money, but this time knowing it was going to the casino or the bar, but still doing it anyway. Having worked in a dollar store, I saw some people come through who had to be pretty thrifty. First was dollar store steaks. Seriously, steaks for $1. If that doesn't sound sketchy, I don't know what does. Second, this was also a Hispanic thing I noticed. Fabuloso. That stuff cleans everything. I had no clue what it was till I grabbed a busted bottle to clean the bathroom one day. Third, you also get really used to pasta and rice. They're cheap and can be bought in bunches. And lastly, everyone bought 2 sandwiches from Subway because a third is free. Coupons like this go a long way. One last thing I noticed, and this is pretty bad, the dollar store's toilet paper is seriously better than the toilet paper my mom buys. Sacrificing my plate of food to feed my little brother and 3 little sisters whilst my mom gave up her food as well. I was 10 when this was happening, all while my obese, abusive stepdad ate steak and Brussels sprouts, lest my mom got beat. Luckily, he's gone now. Mom's somewhat stable and I'm 17. I'm saving up money right now, but that's one thing I fear being. I don't want to be hungry or unable to provide. I just remember telling my mom that I'm hungry, and her breaking down and crying. Luckily, I had a best friend that I used to go to and bring leftovers from across the street back over. About a year ago, I was addicted to alcohol, 4,000 kilometers from home, dropped out of school, and living in my 20-year-old car. I got so used to eating microwave potatoes that I considered walking into a 7-Eleven and pocketing a handful of mayo packets while pretending to buy a hot dog. A special treat. I grew up distinctly middle class and generally didn't want for much. My recent experience has really put into perspective the difficulties experienced by people who are or have been in similar situations to myself, but bear the burden of direct responsibility to kids and family. Things have gotten a lot better since I've accepted the help of other people. Seriously, even relatively tiny gestures of kindness will go a long way with someone who's literally struggling for survival. Never underestimate the impact you can have upon another person's life. I'd probably be dead by now if it weren't for the unconditional love and support of friends, family, and random strangers. Instead, I'm 25, relatively healthy again, and back in school trying to finish off my engineering degree. It's not really about what you buy, it's about what you can make or substitute. Can't afford to run to the gas to run the stove and want that French toast? Toast the bread on the barbecue, grill melt some butter, and sprinkle cinnamon sugar on it. Can't afford real spaghetti? Mix some tomato soup and butter. Heat till warm, pour over some ramen, and you have yourself some poor man's spaghetti. You'd also be surprised what you can get for almost free at garage sales or online.
People who have ever hired homeless people with the "will work for food" signs, what was your experience like? One super cold night over Christmas break a couple of years back, my roommates and I were walking to Taco Bell and saw a homeless man laying in the parking lot. He had a cheap thin blanket, so we brought him some food and asked him if he wanted to spend the night inside, and he came back and stayed at our house. Via Facebook, we helped him find his daughter, who he hadn't spoke to in a couple of years. He was able to wish her a Merry Christmas. I spent the night worrying that he would steal everything in the house. When I woke up, the blankets were neatly folded, and he had left us 2 pairs of socks and some deodorant. A week later, we came home to find that someone had raked all of our leaves for us. Haven't seen him since, but I hope he is well. 10 out of 10, would do again. Lovely story, dig the human kindness. I myself could not help someone to that degree, allowing them in my home, but that's because I have skepticism and doubts in people's human nature. In college, I got my fraternity to hire a homeless guy I always talked to do security for our parties. I went to college in a pretty crappy city, and my fraternity never turned people away from our parties, so we sometimes had to worry about gang members wandering in. I actually met a former Latin king who was pretty cool. The school wouldn't provide security since it could be seen as them condoning underage drinking, so I suggested we hire this homeless guy I knew who was always at my go-to Munchies gas station because he had actually helped me out when I almost got mugged once, and knew a lot of the less than savory characters. We told him we just needed him to let us know if there was anyone he knew might cause a problem. Dude was more professional than most bouncers at the bars I've been to. He made everyone that wasn't obviously a student show their neck and wrists for gang tattoos and ran a tight goddamn ship. Our president ended up getting him a bouncer job at a club downtown. That's a little more my speed. Give a man a fish, teach a man to fish, yada yada yada. I'm sure you all know the saying. I was homeless for 4 years, 15 to 19. One day I applied for a security guard job at the local hospital for a joke. Was punkish at the time. When I showed up, I almost scared the guy off, but he shook it off and asked me to stay for the interview. For the first half hour, he asked me questions one would ask any applicant. After he finished, he looked at me and asked me my story. We sat and talked for close to 2 hours. I got my stuff and was preparing to leave when he came up to me and told me, "Cut your hair, take off the piercings, and be here on Wednesday. You look like a guy that could use a chance in life." I went back to my hole that night and thought things through. It was August 16th, 2001, and I've been off the streets ever since. Sometimes all we need in life is a chance to prove ourselves. That last bit rings so true, but it's such a shame because I've seen a lot of people squander that opportunity in turn or short-term satisfaction. I once picked up a hitchhiker that was trying to get from Washington to New Mexico when I was camping in Yellowstone. He had family in New Mexico that offered to help him and had a good job lined up. He just had to get there. So we packed him up and took him back to Colorado with us. He stayed on our couch for a week or two and picked up our mess and took care of maintenance I grossly neglected. My roommates and I were in college at the time and partied 3 to 4 days a week, so you can imagine the mess. The little money he would get from doing odd jobs for neighbors and such, he would buy food and beer for all of us. One day I had an errand to run about 50 miles closer to his destination, but still 300 plus miles from where he needed to be. He came with me, and when he got out of the car, handed me a letter and said, "Don't read it until I get home," then walked through a field straight towards the Rocky Mountains. When I got home, we all read the letter, and it was the kindest set of words I'd ever received. About a month later, we get a call from an area code I don't recognize. It was him. He made it and called us on his first payday at his new gig. He also told us about the remainder of his journey. Turns out he walked and camped a large portion of the way back. I have since moved multiple times and grown up a bit. He's still welcome back whenever he wants, though. I hope all is well, Freddy. Maybe it's because I watched the first half of Batman Begins till 2 in the morning the other night, but something about that just sounds so cool. He turned away, walked through a field towards the Rocky Mountains. Cool AF. We've hired hundreds of them over the last 20 years, mainly because I'm lazy and I can make more money with my time doing what I do. The only really memorable one was Tavion. Tavion stopped me in our parking lot one Friday morning and said he needed some work and he was willing to do whatever we had. Just the day before, I'd gotten a notice from the city saying the bamboo on our back lot was getting out of hand, and we needed to get rid of it. It's a little over an acre, and if you've ever seen how bamboo grows, there were thousands of 20-foot stalks. Told him I'd give him $100 to do it. Gave him a machete and figured I'd never see him or the machete again. Over the course of the day, he cut every damn piece of the bamboo down and had them laid in a couple of huge piles. Paid him his money, thanked him, and told him I'd get my guys to haul it to the dump Monday. He asked me if he could have the big pieces first, and I gladly let him. Came back in Monday morning and he was back in the lot helping somebody load a monster-sized load of bamboo onto a trailer. He'd spent the weekend cutting all the branches off and trimming it into 6-foot-long sections and was selling them all for $350 to a local plant nursery he'd done day labor work for in the past. We talked about it for a few minutes after the truck left, and he just kept smiling and saying there was a hustle in everything, you just had to find it. That is some real good advice from Tavion. In Chile, my father and I parked in a sketchy neighborhood when we went to visit some family. Dad sees a homeless guy and gives him $5 and tells him to watch our car. Later, when we're walking back to our car, we see some guy trying to take our windshield wipers. My dad's about to yell something when our homeless guy comes running like a bum out of hell, punches the guy in the back of the head, and the guy runs off. Homeless dude chases after him, but my dad tells him to calm down. Dad gives him some extra cash and we have dinner with him. 10 out of 10 would hire again. Well, technically your father hired him. Also, there's something strange about the possessive language in saying, our homeless guy. I tried once, really just wanted my lawn mowed. Told the guy I'd cook him a meal if he mowed my lawn. All I got was an FU. He was literally holding a sign that said, we'll work for food. Maybe he really was just looking for money. Maybe because I was 19 at the time, he thought I was messing with him. I guess I'll never know. Unfortunate, but perhaps the man's been burnt too many times. Unsure if he was homeless, but a young man on a bike asked to paint the numbers on my curb for a donation. I was noticing that it was illegible just the other day, so made sense to have it done. He'd done my neighbor's house and it looked good enough, so I said yes. We chatted a bit. He said he'd been laid off and couldn't find work. I ended up giving him $10 for about 10 minutes of work. He did a really nice job. 2 cans of paint, a pack of number stencils, and his positive attitude was a good investment on his part. I well and truly hope things worked out for that guy. Sometimes when you fall on hard times, you might not have a glamorous backup plan or anything like that, but as long as you're making money, as long as you haven't given up and just decided to wallow in your failure, I'd say you still have a chance of picking yourself back up. My parents have a house in Florida they rent out. My dad was down there doing repairs to it when a homeless man on a bike stopped by and asked if my dad needed help. Dad decided to hire him. Alton, the homeless man, helped my dad repaint the house, mow the lawn, and cut out all the overgrown plants. When the house wasn't rented and my family was up north, my dad paid Alton to mow the yard and keep an eye on the place. While working with my dad, Alton asked my dad if he could borrow some money to buy some nice pants and shoes for an interview he had for a job. Dad wasn't sure he could trust him yet, so instead my dad took him out to a store and they went shopping together for these items. Alton got the job as a chef and eventually got himself a room in a house with some other guys. Occasionally, Alton will ask my dad for some emergency money and he always finds a way to pay it back. I find it interesting that my dad was so open to work with Alton due to him being both black and poor, those being 2 types of people my dad can say judgmental things about. Either way, I'm glad it all worked out for Alton. Words and the things people say can certainly give us a good insight into the thoughts and feelings of those around us, but at the end of the day, when an opportunity arises, it is the actions people take that they should be truly judged on. My family gave a man a job around our farm who was homeless. He stayed at a house on our property and worked on various jobs. He was a great guy and just made some mistakes by getting involved in illegal substances. He was a great worker and did a lot of good work. Eventually, sadly, his wife came back into his life and got him back on the junk. He pawned some of our equipment off and left. Either way, they can be great workers, but sometimes there are deeper problems that are reasons they are homeless in the first place. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for a betrayal, and this is a pretty damn bad betrayal. Pretty late to this, but hey, I feel good for what I did. I was a shift leader at a Hardee's, Carl's Jr. for you West Coast people, and it was perfectly located near where the homeless and all the skate kids hung out at. Both groups used to come in and harass everyone before I became a shift leader. Once I got to that point, instead of yelling and kicking them out, I decided to sit them down and ask what's going on. Come to find out, many of those teenagers and kids were either living in abusive homes or even homeless. I got the idea to keep the food people mess up and even using my manager meal to feed these poor kids while I could. I became real close with many of them, and to this day keep up on all of them. One in particular used to be in and out of jail a lot. I promised him every time he comes out, I'll buy his first real food. Well, after a while I moved jobs and got him a job where I worked at. A few months later, helping him out with what I could, he got a place. His girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time, moved in and they are doing great and their baby is adorable. Being able to help and understand so many of those kids now really changed my view on so many kids and why they act the way they do. I really have nothing else to say except good job. A lot of these stories have been a lot more positive than I was expecting, and I have very little to say after a certain point. A homeless guy came by my house when I wasn't home and asked my roommate if he could pick up the sticks in the yard. My roommate gave him some money and the guy left without doing anything. A few weeks later, the guy came by when I was home, but my roommate was out. He started telling me I owed him money for cleaning up my yard. I had never seen him before, so I told him to get the hell off my property before I busted his head open. He left and then came back, broke into my house a few days later and stole a guitar I'd had since I was a kid. Heartwarming? No. Well, great googly moogly, is the latter half of the video going to be about how people shouldn't be too naive? I hired a homeless guy years ago when I was a construction superintendent building condos, Frank. He was a super hard worker, always showed up on time, usually before me, waiting at the job site. Frank was a former high school football star and was ridiculously strong, so anything that required brute force was Frank's domain. He also already had a lot of construction experience, so he didn't need to be supervised very much. I got to like Frank a lot. Everyone did. He was a very emotional and passionate guy. He had no problem crying, even at an inappropriate time. But that's what we loved about him. He was just very genuine. But like many homeless people, sadly, he had a drinking problem, and I suspect some illegal substance problems as well. I never knew for sure. I knew he was a drunk, though. I also didn't really care because, like I said, he showed up for work on time and he kicked butt at it. Anyway, since I was young and naive at the time, I took a big chance on Frank. I bought him an old pickup truck for $2,500. He had recently roomed up with this Jamaican guy who seemed okay and had a place to stay. So I figured if I gave him a truck, it might be enough to push-start him into a stable life. He had no driver's license, so I told him we would work to get that taken care of, but only Jamaica could drive for now. He called his Jamaican roommate Jamaica. Well, a week later, he gets arrested for driving without a license and the car gets impounded. I was furious. I cussed him out. He cried. I paid to get the truck out of the impound lot and gave it to another friend who needed a car, and he basically did the same crap. Didn't get his license, didn't take care of legal issues he had, so let the truck just sit at his house for 6 months. I eventually just sold the truck on Craigslist. Interestingly, I ran into Frank a few years ago, and he told me he was taking classes in community college and has a place to stay, so I was happy to hear that. But the lesson is, don't be naive. I hope Frank's doing okay, but you can get burned by being too nice. Some people just aren't ready to fix their own lives, and you can't force it. Yep, that last little bit, literally the most important part. I know it seems like I'm being a pessimistic little B-word, but remember that. No joke, I hired a guy to help clean our house barn. He showed up every day and worked his butt off for months. I noticed this guy had old beaten up glasses and looked like they were 4 inches thick, and when he took them off, he was absurdly blind. I asked him when he had last seen an eye doctor, and it had been over 2 decades. I told him if he continued to save his money for a future studio apartment, I would buy him new glasses. The day finally came when he had saved $1,000, and I honored my word and bought him some new glasses, and it came out to about $400, and he literally started crying crying when he first put them on because he could see so much better. A few months after that, money started disappearing from the office. This barn was easy to break into if you were skinny because you could slide in under the metal gate just barely enough to get inside. After working with the police, we set up a floor mat that automatically calls the police when it's stepped on. That night, I showed up to the barn with all the police lights illuminating it. Inside the barn, unable to sneak back out of the crack under the metal gateway, was Leroy. When he was arrested, he was drunk and in possession of a pipe for smoking illegal substances. I saw him a few more times on the street, and it broke my heart. These are already getting quite depressing, but it does vary things up a little bit. I mentioned it earlier, but sometimes people give up long-term, real opportunities for work or even friendship in exchange for their baser, more quick relief habits. And if you ever find yourself in that situation, you've got to be able to make the decision on what is better for you and stick with it, as hard as it might be. Once when I was a kid, my dad and I were parking on a moderately sketchy Manhattan street around 8 at night to go to a restaurant. At the time, my dad drove a Lincoln Navigator, and when he parked it, this homeless guy immediately started chatting him up the second we took a step onto the sidewalk. I remember him telling my dad that he'd watch his car for $20 and make sure nobody messed with it while we were eating. My dad gave him the $20, and while we were eating, I asked him why, and he told me because if I didn't give him the $20, he would have slashed my tires himself. When we got out, the dude was still standing there by the car, and well, it was fine. You know what, if that was his true intention, smart homeless man and even smarter father for knowing that that's probably his true intention. I was in my front yard and a man came up to me and asked if I had any work. He said he needed $9 so he could catch a bus to Tennessee to go live with his sister. He said he hadn't eaten in 3 days. He had caught his wife cheating and she threw him out on the streets. I had a couple small odd jobs and he did them. I gave him a bag of food, $20 and a story. Many years ago, after a train trip from Ohio to New York City, I realized I didn't have enough money to get home, to Connecticut. I was jokingly telling the couple that I had been sitting with on the train my woes. The man pulls out his wallet and hands me a $20 bill to tell me to pay it forward someday. The homeless man was in tears, gave me a hug, thanked me, and promised me he would. I hope he is okay. Well, at the end of the day, that's the best you can hope for, that in doing a good deed for someone, they'll keep that good deed in their heart and mind, remember it forever, and hopefully treat people as kindly as you treated them, or, at least maybe change their ways if maybe they weren't as good a person when you met them. This doesn't directly answer the question, but I thought I'd contribute. It's not really much about how good or bad the homeless guy was, but more about how he affected me. I'm not a very good storyteller, but if you want to read on, please do. I was never truly homeless, but I sort of put myself in a situation a few years back. But this is not a story about me, it's a story about my dear friend. We'll call him Sean. I have an advanced education and at the time had decent prospects of a job. I wanted to start my own business, so on a very big opportunity, I started a business, got a warehouse, office equipment, and all that. The promising line fell through, so I went to business plan B. Anyways, my ex is equally educated and stuff, but she didn't want to work to support me while I got my business taking off. Some other personal issues as well, but that is the gist of it. Anyways, we separated, and with a little bit of savings, I ended up living in the warehouse. I did get divorced eventually, since I was on plan B instead of money rolling in. I had to fight tooth and nail to make sales one by one. The business eventually grew and it wasn't doing that bad, but in the beginning it was a dark period of my life for many reasons. Divorce and being very poor was one thing, but one of my parents was diagnosed with an illness just before the split as well. Because of my immigration status, I couldn't really go to see her and I hadn't seen her in a few years. I used to think of some dark things every day for a long time, but a few things kept me going. Grit, determination, and I told myself I had to survive to go and see my parents again. But another thing was my friend Sean, my land manager, a really nice guy that put up with me living in an industrial neighborhood, hires guys in bad situations to help around here and there, ex-cons, homeless guys, etc. To be honest, from what I can tell, a bunch of them were pieces of crap, but not Sean. He lived in a warehouse on the other side of the street. I was in a bad shell where the only time I'd go out and meet other people was to get drunk. Sean helped me get out of this rut. Sean was much older than me, in his late 50s. I was in my mid-20s. He was a straight-up alcoholic. Sean moaned, was relatively sour, and kinda did bare minimum at work, but boy did he know how to fix things. I hired him to do some work around my shop. Even though I didn't really have much money, he always did a good job. He would come over unannounced or knock on my door when I was still sleeping at like 2 p.m. It was exactly sort of the intervention and interaction I needed. He'd tell me about his divorce, course, and about how he was heartbroken, but how time passes and heals most wounds. He'd also tell me about his folks passing when I was talking about my parent. He sucked at cooking and made really unhealthy stuff, but he'd always bring over food if he made some. Eventually, it got to the point where whenever I felt extremely bad, I'd go over and have a beer or two. Shoot the breeze, listen to his stories of his wild youth, look at some cool memorabilia he collected, pictures of old muscle cars, drag cars he worked on, etc. When it came to working on cars and motorcycles, I had a couple of clunkers. He just helped me for free. I tried to help back by helping him keep down his alcohol intake and listen to him vent when he wasn't drinking. Of course, gave him jobs whenever I needed it and could afford to hire someone. Anyways, we came from extremely different backgrounds, especially since I was largely a kid who grew up in a good family who was pushed to get all the education I can get. Him, on the other hand, had just recently been homeless and living as a bum. In some strange ways, he became my best friend for that year. I grew the business but pulled myself out of the situation. It was no longer worth my time to hang on to this past dream and left for a job interview on a project that I'd get paid handsomely. On the way back, I called him back to check up on him and he told me he was just moaning about his pains again. The years had been very hard on his body and he didn't really take care of himself, so he was always complaining about one thing or another. I just made sure someone in the area knew about it and was checking in on him and didn't think much of that. Anyways, that was the last time I ever spoke to him. He passed away while I was making a cross-country drive back to the city. My good friend Sean came in and out of my life just as he had lived his life. I still kept this Christmas card he wrote me one year. It reminds me to be thankful, for he was there during the lowest points of my life. And to everyone else, you never know who will come in and out of your life to help you move on. That is absolutely the best and my favorite story on this topic. They cultivated a relationship, acknowledged each other's flaws, became friends, they trusted each other, had each other's back, talked about their issues and whatnot, and it's super tragic that his friend died, but at the end of the day, this dude, Sean, obviously left a really lasting, positive impression on him that gave him hope, and you know what? If you've got no hope for yourself, well, God, why not try and cultivate hope for other people?
Teachers of Reddit, they say there are no stupid questions. But what's the most stupid question a student has ever asked you? Not a question, but more a statement that prompted a whole discussion when I was student teaching. To set the stage, I'd like to point out that I'm white and my leading teacher was African American, and the classroom was about 60% African American, 30% Latino, and the remaining 10% a mixture of Asian and white. This was also my advanced class, and we were discussing the apartheid in Africa. So the black Africans and white Africans, and I immediately get interrupted. A student raises their hand. Miss Ducky, you can't say that. Me. Say what? Student. Black. It's African American. Me, trying my hardest not to die a little inside. No, that is actually not the correct phrase. Can anyone tell me why African American is not the correct term for this situation? I'm met with silence. Me. Okay guys, look at it this way. Are we talking about Americans? No, we're not. We're talking about a racial issue in Africa with no relation to America at all. The definition of African American is a person of African descent living in America. So if the people we're talking about are not American, they can't be African American, can they? So to talk about the racial issue, the labels are used as black Africans and white Africans, as outlined by our textbook. Student. No, you can't say that. They're African American. At this point, my lead teacher is facepalming. She's in total disbelief, and as much as she loved to watch me struggle, she stepped in and tried to explain it as well. 20 minutes go by of the two of us really trying our best. The bell ends up ringing, the kids still couldn't figure out, and I think we both nearly cried. Grade 5 Sex Ed. I had a rule that any question can be asked, but I might ask you to ask your parents instead of me. I heard a story about a man who put his stuff into muffins and then fed it to grade 1 kids. Well, that's pretty disgusting, and I would think that person would go to jail for doing that. Wouldn't the girls get pregnant from eating it? And before I could say anything, another student blurted out, "No, they wouldn't get pregnant. They haven't gone through puberty yet." I'm thankful for days when kids remind me that they're still kids. I actually had a student ask me, what are those pyramid-shaped things in Egypt called? I've never seen a class laugh that hard before. I once projected a picture of the Earth onto the front whiteboard. A student asked, "How do astronauts stand on a planet like that?" This was an 8th grade student being totally serious. 9th grade ELA, a few chapters into Of Mice and Men. What kind of work does George do on the farm? I'm not sure. Probably the same work that everyone else is doing. Oh, it must be hard for him to help out since he's a mouse. At the college midterm, I had a guy come up to me that I've never seen in class. He proceeded to ask me what his grade is. I checked the sheet and he never turned in a single piece of homework, no quizzes, and never attended a test. What did you think you'd have? You got a solid F. After a lengthy explanation of the effects of volcanic eruptions on human communities, I had a grade 6 student ask me why on earth people even make volcanic eruptions. While I was student teaching, I had a student ask where Texas was on the map I was projecting on the screen. The map was of China. I'm a private writing instructor. A couple of years ago, I had a student ask me if commas were real or imaginary. He was equally dubious about semicolons, which he referred to as imitation periods. He was 26 and very serious. In 7th grade science during sex ed, they were talking about oral sex. A Mormon girl in class said, "Wait, you can get an STD just from talking about sex?" I wouldn't call the question stupid, just no exposure at all to the topic beforehand. I was asked by a crying student once if there was a second moon. We were outside for recess, and as happens sometimes, the moon was visible. I said no. Why? And she pointed to the moon and asked, "But aren't the sun and moon the same thing?" 4th grade student, not special needs or anything. She was crying because the other kids were making fun of her for thinking the sun and the moon were the same thing. After I explained to her that the sun did not turn into the moon at night and then back into the sun in the morning, I did an impromptu science lesson that afternoon with the whole class. This came up all the time when I was teaching kids how to do their taxes. I must have had this conversation a dozen times. "Sir, I don't know what to do with this part." What does the instruction say on the line? "Add box 23 and 24 and write the answer here." So add box 23 and 24. I, to this day, have no idea how you teach someone to follow very explicit instructions. As part of teaching US government, I ran a zombie apocalypse scenario where the students had to respond to an ongoing crisis in real time, using the actual powers of the government as different parts of the government. It was my favorite activity all semester, and I went all in, including a large map of the US that would be updated every day that passed. As part of this activity, I prepared a handout of a fake news story about the zombie apocalypse beginning in our hometown. It had pictures of zombies shambling around and was written all newspaper style. One day after handing these out, an 18-year-old student raised their hand and said, "Mr. Poster, did this really happen?" I had a pupil ask me if the sun they saw in America was the same as the sun we saw here in Scotland, and why was their sun so much warmer? In health class, while going over reproduction, there was a student who raised her hand and asked if you were sterile, could you pass it on to your children? The whole class giggled, and she, confused, said she was serious. She wanted to know if you're sterile, could you pass it on to your kids? I said to her, "Okay, let's think about this. What does it mean to be sterile?" She started answering, "It means you can't have Oh. Followed by another round of laughter from the rest of the class. For sex ed class, we had a box where students could submit questions anonymously. One day, one of the questions asked, "My dad's bits are circumcised, but not mine. Does this mean he isn't my dad?" Yeah, they believed circumcision was hereditary. I used to do volunteer teaching at an after-school program for 14-year-olds. We were doing a project that involved balloons. One boy had blown his balloon but couldn't get it tied. I tied it and gave it back to him. He immediately tossed it up. As it sank to the floor, his face fell. Obviously disappointed, he asked, "Aw, so they're not helium?" Warm spring day, no AC. Fan blowing in the front of the room. Hand goes up. "Can you make the fan ovulate?" No, I cannot. My wife is a teacher, but this is my favorite story of hers. They were discussing how Native Americans relied on hunting buffalo and used all parts of it for food, clothing, shelter, etc. In reference to how they used the buffalo for shelter, one student asked, "So do they stack the buffalo on top of each other?" This one kid in my 10th grade biology class takes the cake for me. We were going over chromosomes, talking about the effects of an extra chromosome, Down syndrome, and this kid looks confused as hell, gears turning like mad in his head. Finally, he raises his hand. With the extra chromosome, shouldn't they be like superheroes? Most of the idiotic questions I get are linked to history, even though I'm an English teacher. They have no idea about different time periods or a sense of centuries. So I would get questions like, why didn't Dickens just get on a plane? Was the internet not around then? Then being the 1700s. Were the Victorians around when dinosaurs were? And these are 14 to 16-year-olds. It gets even harder for them when thinking about the few decades prior to their existence, i.e. the 50s through 90s. I wonder if we're all like that a little when we're so young. I was a teacher's assistant for a geography class. I had been the teacher's assistant for this class for 3 semesters, and the professor had decided to retire. New professor comes in and tries to make this class as not boring that it could possibly be. In her defense, she did teach the class with enthusiasm. Anyway, the second project for the class was a short presentation about different resources of the world, renewable energy, non-renewable, etc. I tell 90 plus students and email every single one of them to email me their presentation when they're done, and I'll put them on a list for the order of presentations. I get a good 60 to 75 presentations. The week of presentations, I sent out an email with the list and get a good 10 or so emails back asking why they weren't on the list. I calmly explain to them the aforementioned instructions and send out a new list. On the first day, 5 more students ask me the same question. A bit irritated, I explain to them as well and announce it to the class once more. The list gets very long, and the students' lack of preparation continues. Presentations get extended to 2 or more weeks, and in those 2 weeks, the stragglers email me. At this point, I've lost my hope in humanity, and I just get more and more irritated. I had done everything to ensure that every one of those students knew what to do for presentations, even if they were out sick. They still had an email that they needed to check in case an announcement was made. It stuck with me for the rest of the semester, and I found out from my professor that some students complained about me as being the worst and rudest TA they ever had. This one is one of my favorites. I had one of my choir students sitting there studying her hands for about 10 minutes. She wasn't really singing, just quizzically looking at both sides of her hands. So I finally asked what was so interesting about her hands. Her response? Well, I was wondering, are gloves like underwear for your hands? No, they're not. Later that year, she was also surprised to learn that helicopters were started inside the cabin of the helicopter and not by a gigantic ripcord pulled by a bunch of people. Let me give you a bit of context first. I teach social science in Sweden, ages 16 to 18, and this particular question came from an 18-year-old. We had been working on a theme about crime, punishment, and legislation, and we had devoted a couple of hours on the issue of file sharing, whether it should be legal or illegal, the morality of it, etc. So, on the test, I included a question about file sharing, both because I knew we had covered it in class and because I knew that every single one of them was guilty of file sharing. As I always do when handing out a text or quiz, I ask my students to read all questions before starting to answer them. As they started reading the questions, one of them looks up at me and asks, "Mr. Poster, what is file sharing?" There was a moment of complete and utter silence in the classroom, and then his classmates opened up on him. And my God, they were savage. The thing is, he just experienced a temporary brain freeze. Test nerves, probably. And I could see in his eyes right after he asked the question that it dawned on him. To his credit, he took it like a champ. Just sat there and nodded as he got roasted so bad that not even the best burn ward would have taken him in as salvageable. 10th grade honors chemistry. Topic is states of matter. What would liquid ice be called? We're still not sure if he was making a joke about the short-lived icebreaker mints, liquid ice, because everyone was laughing too hard. Elementary student after leaving their backpack on the bus. Someone should invent some sort of device that attaches a backpack to a person's body so they don't lose it. I'm a casual lecturer and have a young family, so only work the hours I'm paid. Quite often, I'll get a student not show for the entire semester, then in the last week appear and ask why I can't teach them out of hours. There have been tears and complaints when I basically said that if they'd shown up to class, they'd know what they were doing, and I have better things to do with my life than support lazy students. If you drink too much Gatorade and fill up to here, points at throat, do you drown? You know there's stuff in your body and you're not just a hollow tank, right? Here's my personal favorite. We were watching documentaries in black and white. I think about the Great Depression. A kid raises his hand, and I call on him. He says, "Never mind, it's a stupid question." I say, "There are no stupid questions. Go ahead." He proceeds with, "Did they have color back then? Like, in real life?" I was dumbfounded and could not keep a straight face. Turns out there are stupid questions. Whenever I have a professor that tells us to ask anything because there are no stupid questions, I immediately raise my hand and ask, why do meteorites always land in craters? My cousin is a teacher, and one day he had to teach a sex ed unit to the class. You know, the ones where everyone splits off into boy and girl groups so that they can put any question in a hat and have it answered anonymously. He's a guy, so he was answering the questions for the boys. So he got some questions that were clearly looking for stupid answers and threw them out. As usual, certain jokers were trying to get a rise out of him. Then he got a question that asked, why do you have to have an erection to have sex with a girl? This one he couldn't avoid. He didn't know if it was serious or not, so he decided he would have to answer it. He said, you know how you have the plastic tip on the end of your shoelaces to get it in the hole? It's kind of like that. This may be the greatest metaphor I ever personally heard of. We're getting ready for a field trip in a class of about 20. I make the announcement, we're leaving in about 10 minutes, go to the bathroom and fill up your water bottles. Everyone's getting ready and standing around, and one of my students comes to me in a panic. Excuse me, have we left yet? We all look around at everyone standing by the door or by their desks. No, I don't think we've left yet. Good grief. I was only student teaching at the time. It was a high school biology class on human reproduction unit. We're talking about sperm. My mentor teacher asks, so what is the purpose of glucose in human sperm? A student replied in a genuine manner, so that it tastes sweet? Not really a question, but an answer to a question. I was teaching a world history course to 10th graders and asked the question, what does AD mean? A couple kids took a shot but were wrong, and a girl who fit the absolute textbook description of a stereotypical cheerleader raised her hand and answered as confidently as someone would answer that the sky is blue or grass is green with, after dinosaurs. I'm a teacher in an urban district with a high immigrant population. I've been asked why people don't fall off the bottom of the earth, if anyone lives on Mars, if Jewish people really are aliens, etc. Neither the questions nor the students were truly stupid. Many students had simply been raised in areas with little or no formal education, or by parents who themselves were incredibly negligent, superstitious, and/or uninformed. I teach history and religion. As I was driving with one of my students, I passed a church that I briefly attended my freshman year of college. Pointing it out, I mentioned that they were a fundamentalist Protestant church, and I asked her if she knew the history of that church. And I kid you not, her literal and immediate response was, yeah, aren't they the ones who followed Martin Luther King Jr. when he broke off from the Anglican church but kept everything almost exactly the same? Yeah, she somehow blended 3 separate religious reformations from 3 very different periods of time, confused which churches were a part of those reformations, and somehow threw the American Civil Rights Movement in there. It was pretty bad. We were discussing the plight of African Americans during Reconstruction. If black people had such a bad time in America, why did they immigrate here? I immediately saw the black kid behind her sit up and silently mouth, "What the F?" Sadly, this was in a high school honors course. I will say in the girl's defense, she immediately knew how idiotic that question was and turned bright red. Cringeworthy moment for all. I'm a teacher, and there really are no stupid questions from students. And if you read the responses, you'll see that they're mostly just questions from genuinely curious kids who have big gaps in their knowledge or understanding, which is not their fault, but the fault of previous teachers, their parents, or something they've read or heard about only in passing and misunderstood. The only questions that frustrate me are the ones that are willfully ignorant or are asked as a joke and derail good discussions, or by a student that ignored my long and detailed instructions asking me the exact question I just spent minutes answering. But when you're dealing with 12 to 14-year-olds, it comes with the territory, and it's all entirely forgivable. And I'm a teacher to help them learn how to be thoughtful humans. My parents used to teach identical 6th grade science curriculum at 2 different schools and grade papers at home together. They would read the dumbest answers aloud, one-upping each other until they had a winner. The only answer I remember clearly was to the question, what is the smallest thing in the universe? One kid answered, about the size of 2 potatoes. I teach 2nd grade in Massachusetts, but I'm originally from Texas, so I had someone from home be pen pals with my class. My kids were writing letters to their pen pals. They're supposed to tell them something about themselves and then ask them some questions. Miss Poster, do they speak English in Texas? Do I speak English? Yes. Am I from Texas? Yes. So what do you think the answer to your question might be? Maybe? So we spent the day talking about the Japanese attack and America's entrance into World War II. Student number 1, wait, is Pearl Harbor still alive? Raucous laughter until student number 2, of course she's dead. I was teaching a history class that was learning about the invasion of the Huns and the fall of Rome. During silent reading, a student raised their hand and called me over. He asked me, were these like half horse people? I was really confused and asked why he thought that. It says here they were skilled horsemen. I told him that just meant they were good at riding horses, not that they were centaurs. I teach 4th grade, and a student did some great work, and I made an offhanded comment about how I love my job. Another student asked, what's your job? I teach preschool, so I could go on and on about dumb things. But my favorite is this story. During group time one day, I couldn't help but notice one of my kids had a very strong poop odor. I pulled him aside and asked if he had had an accident. He proudly said no, and that he made it just in time. I suggested he go wipe again and double check. About 5 minutes later, he comes to me with his hands covered in poop. He said I didn't tell him what to wipe with, so he just used his hands. I was holding study hall for 11th and 12th graders. From the back of the room, a few students began arguing back and forth. When I asked what was going on, one of the girls looked me straight in the eye and asked, is it true that you can still get pregnant from anal sex? I ultimately was forced to get an anatomy book and hold a mini health class. I had a kid in 7th grade ask me how people decide which day is their birthday. When I explained to him that your birthday is the day you were born and you don't get to choose it, he couldn't believe it and acted as if I told him he just won 1,000,000 candy bars. I think the dumbest question I've heard went along the lines of, isn't it a fact that conservatives just want to conserve money and liberals just want to liberate people in need? This kid's a senior in college and has been a part of 2 major elections. Like, come on, man, how do you not know the difference? Chemistry teacher here. I'm regularly asked, can I drink this, miss? When students work with chemicals. The solution is bright blue with a hazard label on it. What do you think?
Teens, what is something important that you feel your parents should learn? Do not insist on comparing me to my friends. They do not act the same way in front of you as they might in their own home, and you have no clue how they act when they're at home with their own parents. Done up pretty strong, yeah. I may have heard that once or twice in my teen years. Just because one of my friends is a girl doesn't mean you have to constantly bring her up. What's the story behind that? Do they give you the whole, oh, why don't you take your friend Stephanie to prom? Stephanie's a nice girl. Privacy. My grandmother will come into my room while I'm sleeping just to look through my window above my head to see what the neighbors are doing. She looks above my head to peep at what I'm doing on my phone. She gets mad at me when I don't tell her an answer to a personal question she asks me. She is also untrustworthy and will lie to make a story more interesting so I can't tell her anything in fear she will spread a rumor that isn't true about me. I once told her how the gym teacher passed away from cancer, and she proceeded to call her friend and tell her my gym teacher dropped dead in front of us at the gym and cancer spilled out of her. If cancer could spill out of you, I wonder what it would look like. I bet everyone's like, I'd probably be like a black tarry substance and really smelly and stuff, but I'm picturing like the Nickelodeon slime. Get my attention before talking to me. They did get mad at me when I miss the first half of what they are saying, but it's because I'm already doing something. I don't mind pausing my game, putting down my book/phone, muting the TV, etc. Just say my name, or even, hey, you, before you start talking so I realize I'm supposed to engage. I think that just sounds like a lack of awareness of your surroundings. Like, I like to know who is in the room with me, what's going on, stuff like that at all times. So it's like, are they on the phone? No. Is there anyone else in the room with me? No. So they're obviously talking to me. It's only annoying when they then turn around and go, oh, I'm just talking to myself. You don't have to listen. I understand that compared to you, I shouldn't have any stress, but teen stress does exist. Maybe in the future I'll learn how naive I was and how small my stresses now are, but right now what I'm stressed about matters to me. That's super valid, but I will say, yeah, being an adult kinda sucks. Enjoy being a teenager while you can. Don't stop me from hanging out with my friends and then later complain why am I always in my room and not outside enjoying life. That's just unfair. That does sound pretty dumb, but I don't know, it maybe depends on the kind of people that you're hanging out with. Doesn't mean you can't go out and enjoy life, it just means they don't want you to be hanging out with dodgy people. Like I said though, I don't know what the situation is behind this, I'm just trying to rationalize it to some degree. Communication through technology is still communication. I know it's not true for all people my parents' age, but a lot seem to be stuck on the idea that just because you're texting someone or messaging them online, it's somehow not real contact and not a real relationship with the other person. Does someone have an online girlfriend? That's the way they make it sound at the end, especially. While yes, you do pay for my tuition, car, clothing, food, etc., you need to give me some sense of control. Rules are important, I understand, but I need to learn how to function on my own. If you couldn't tell from my brother developing alcoholism the second he got to college, if you control your kids too hard in high school and then let them out into college, they don't know what to do with the freedom and go frickin' nuts. That is some solid parenting advice. That is so true. Don't snoop through my things. If I have a personal note to or from a friend or a piece of writing, don't look through it and read it, and don't send a picture of it to everyone else in the family. It's out of sight for a reason. People might disagree with me, but I kind of think that parents can snoop through their kids' stuff all they want. If they have a habit of doing it, just get better at hiding your stuff. Don't make fun of our relationships. Whenever they see me talking to a girl, they always ask, "Who's your new girlfriend?" They always ask me after school, "How's your girlfriend doing?" Even when they know I'm not in a relationship, or even right after I break up, I know they're not doing it to be mean, but it's little stuff like this that makes me hesitant to share my actual relationships with them. Just remember that this is sort of an awkward time for us, and relationships are no exception. I always try to take it in jest because I know they're kidding, but other people might take it as an insult. Or you pushing them to find a girlfriend/boyfriend when they are not ready. Also, just because I've been stressed or mopey doesn't mean I'm gay. It just means I don't feel like talking. I've had to explain twice to my parents that I am not a closeted homosexual. Just sounds like pretty basic parental banter to me, but if it's something that this guy's stressed out about, then yeah, fair enough. We're so dramatic because a lot of things are new. We can feel new levels of emotion. It might seem silly to cry over someone we've dated for less than a year, but this is literally the most heartbroken we've ever been. Our schoolwork is the hardest we have ever done. Our responsibilities are the most daunting. From our perspective, what seems trivial to you is new and terrifying and the most extreme it has ever been. I think I've been gauging this more on like the general situation in that like how relatable is this? I understand this is more of a personal thing, but I'm going to say this, parents are dealing with not as many for sure, but also new stressful situations, and it's not about being an adult or a teenager or something like that, because I've said it before. Adults don't have all the answers, and on the heartbreak thing, think about it like this. Yeah, your heart's broken, you like this girl a lot, but at least this girl isn't divorcing you, she's taken your money, your house, and your dog. She didn't even want the dog when you got the dog, but she certainly wants it now. My advice to anyone when they're in like, a dire state of mind or something is think about the situation, think about how much worse it could be and where you are as opposed to the worst it could be, and then just get on with your life, because guess what? All of these situations are bigger in your mind than they are in real life. Of course, then there are problems like paying the mortgage on time. That's a big problem. Our problems are real. My mom is really good at understanding this. She gets angry along with me when I mention how my best friend got hit by her boyfriend. She gives me advice when I say that my friends have depression. She gets worried when I'm quiet and easily angered. Not only does she empathize, she helps. She once dialed 911 for a friend who had attempted self-deletion while I told her how to apply first aid. She gave me permission to deck the abusive boyfriend. She lent me her old psychology textbook so that I could better help my friend with depression. She makes me feel comfortable enough to talk about whatever is bothering me. Most people on this thread give very good examples of what not to do. Let my mother be the model for what to do. I mean it every time I say that she is the best mom ever. Okay, now let's talk about my dad. He is every bit as awesome as my mom, just in different ways. He grew up as the oldest son in a ghetto in San Antonio. He was the first in my family to go to college. He's worked for the Air Force, has been a pastor, been a missionary, and is now a higher up at an energy savings firm. Because of him, I've always lived a comfortable life, but it does not stop there. He teaches me everything he knows. Our remember him explaining his Excel spreadsheet in 5th grade. In middle school, he started giving me a large monthly allowance and told me to pay for basically everything but rent in order to teach me money management. I'll be honest, I talk more to my mom about emotional problems. She got her degree in psychology after all, but I can talk to my dad about literally anything else. Personal finances, politics, theology, current events, books, movies, anything that pops into my head, I can talk to my dad about. He taught me that even if you can't do masculine things like repair a car or assemble furniture, you can still be one of the greatest men out there. I've learned so much from him, and I learned more every day. I told him about this post and asked him if he had anything he wanted to share with the internet. He said, "When your mother and I first had your older brother, we decided that we would have 2 goals in parenting. That you would know that we love you unconditionally, and that you would know we are always there for you. Everything else we do flows out of those 2 goals." Yeah, he actually talks like that. It's awesome. If there are any parents or teens reading this, strive to be like my parents. I wouldn't trade them for anything. Sounds like you got a strong nuclear family right there. You got a mother and a father who are both experienced in their own personal areas of expertise that they use to then build you up into a more rounded person and tell you that they love you all the time. Brag much? Nah, this is good. This was a nice game changer. Yeah, that's how a family should be. You can't pause an online game! Oh, I feel the Lord in the house tonight. Testify, brother, testify! I hope you all appreciate the extra oomph I put into that one. So many arguments about that stuff. Don't assume that teen life today is the same as teen life when you were in high school. If your teen doesn't have a history of stereotypical bad teen behavior, don't treat them like they do. Yeah, I agree with that. For one thing, I think a lot of modern kids probably have anxiety because their simplest mistakes or even their biggest mistakes can be immortalized on a phone then uploaded to the internet within a few minutes. On the latter part, I don't know. I see a lot of scummy behavior from kids that I very much doubt they exhibit in front of their parents. Naturally, that's a case-by-case basis, but there are definitely some kids in the world that are unbelievably entitled. If your child doesn't agree with your religious views, back off and let them think it through. Pushing harder isn't helping and will just make them less likely to return to your faith in the future. I hid my true faith from my parents and went along with their faith for years. My sister decided to come out about her views, and that's how I know I made the right choice. Yeah, just generally don't try and force your opinions on kids in general or anything because, they might turn around and decide that they hate you and all of your ideas. Currently 17 and I'm really into technology. I got a job at 15 because I wanted to build a computer and still hold it today. Anyway, the things I buy are mine. I did work for them and yet they still threaten to take them away from me if I act irritable. Being irritable is caused by depression, anxiety and other crap going on. The constant fighting with my sister that gets on my nerves. Yes, she's screaming, but screaming back will not make her stop. Please, for the love of God, don't downplay my issues. Yes, my girlfriend cheated. Yes, I'm a teenager and maybe it's not that big of an issue, but Christ, don't act like it doesn't affect me and how I act. I have to say, contrary to what I may say in any of these, I always take these stories with a slight pinch of salt. If anything, I wish I could hear the other sides of these things, because in this occasion I wonder, although this kid seems like they're an okay kid, job at 15 and everything like that, clearly has a sense of responsibility and whatnot, that's great. But the real question is here, are you being irritable or are you being insufferable? Just because I don't go out every day does not mean I have no friends. I talk to the same people online every day and see them in class 5 days a week. My parents think I'm antisocial and would get some friends if I go outside. In reality, I am more social when you let me stay in my room. Yeah, I don't really see a problem with that. If you're just staying in all the time whenever you can, that's kind of bad for you. Catch some rays, the sun's great for you. Not in excess, of course. Nothing's good for you in excess. I know that I'm smart and I receive good grades. They just need to learn that I will never be the valedictorian or an honor roll kid or anyone they deem intelligent. I'm a little confused. Do your parents genuinely think you're stupid or do they simply think you are not living up to the potential that you have? Stop comparing us to your high school selves. Yes, Mom, I know you're a class president, prom queen, valedictorian, and captain of the cheer team, but I'm not you, so stop being disappointed and be proud of what my person can achieve. Well, this is just annoying because now I want to know what you can/have achieved. Asking your child to tell the truth about something, and then when they do, being mad at them about it. I would much rather prefer if when I told you the truth, you would thank me for being honest and lightening the punishment, if any. This isn't just for teenagers, though. My younger sister, who is 4, gets into trouble sometimes, and when my mother asks her about it and she tells the truth, she gets very mad at her. So now whenever she asks her to tell the truth, she just lies about it. Makes me sad. Well, that makes me sad too, because you know what? When you're telling a child to tell the truth, you need to be a little more gentle about it. Yeah, they told the truth. They were brave. You don't have to reward them or anything. You just have to be cool about it. You can tell them you're disappointed. You can tell them you're upset. You just gotta be cool. I do not have a goddamn time turner. I cannot clean my room, take a shower, do all my homework, feed the cat, clean the litter box, and put together my Halloween costume in 1 hour. I hang out with older people. I'm 15. I mostly hang out with 18 to 20-year-olds I meet through activism/environmentalism, volunteer leadership stuff because the conversations are more intellectually stimulating. There's no dumb drama. They're inspiring people that I look up to a lot. Networking is easier and I've opened up amazing opportunities for myself, and frankly, I just enjoy being with them more than anybody else my age. No, we don't go off and drink booze. No, they're not peer pressuring me into having sex. No, we're not doing illegal substances. They're just nicer people. I know you think 15 is way too young to be doing traveling programs and internships, but I have plans and goals in mind for the future, and as much as I'd like to be your little girl forever, you need to let me grow up and start exploring my options. I don't understand why you can't just be happy that I'm eager about post-sex stuff already like any other parent would. Volunteering and doing environmental work isn't a waste of time. I'm networking in areas that might be useful in the future. I'm making friends that I actually like. I'm building essential skills like public speaking and fundraising. I'm making a name for myself. I'm enjoying myself and I'm giving back to the community. Please stop threatening to take away my volunteer work as punishment. Sounds like they're pretty happy doing what they're doing, so I don't understand why they don't just let them. Just, make sure that you remain to be a solid part of their life, give them support and love and stuff like that, and make sure that none of their 20-plus-year-old friends are just waiting for them to turn 18. It might be legal, but I'd still say it's grounds for grooming. Probably too late, but this one bugs the hell out of me. It isn't the 70s and 80s anymore. Yes, we understand that you didn't use your TVs barely at all. You rode your bikes and played basketball, etc., etc. And yes, we understand it's good for us to be active, but we live in a different generation. The generation before them married young, didn't have all the extra time due to technological advances that makes life easier and so on. Things change, and yet parents still parent like they wish they had been 30 years ago. I love my parents to death, but that's my biggest pet peeve with them. That's a conversation I have fairly frequently. I mean, it's weird to think that a couple hundred years ago, you'd have until maybe you were 30 or something like that, and that would be considered a full life, maybe for good reason. Lord knows it sucks to get so old that you literally cannot do anything for yourself. But I think as a result, with modern technology, medicine, and all that stuff, we have a generation of people that just kind of stay as teenagers for a lot longer than they probably should. That ain't me judging or anything like that, but, always keep in mind that you should really get your life on track. Learn to use a computer. Oh god, I super get this one. I think my mother only learned how to use a computer, or, she uses a tablet really, about 5 or so years ago. What's really annoying is that she still doesn't know how to copy and paste. Because I said so is a crappy reason. Depends on what they're asking you to do. It's not weird for a Hispanic truck driver to deliver to the Hong Kong market. Ah, yes, the immortal rivalry of the Chinese and the Mexicans. Your favoritism towards my sister devastates me. I mean, how can they help it? She's so much cooler than you. I kid. Favoritism, at least really, really blatant favoritism that results in, neglect is really awful.
Parents commenting on how I spend my money. I only spend about 20% of what I make on things I frickin' want that I now have to hide. This is how my closet under my bed is now full of Magic the Gathering cards. If they only knew how much I spent.
I don't know, card games are kind of a money sink. I mean, you get into them and then you gotta keep up with expansions that introduce new mechanics into the game because then your old decks are kind of obsolete based around the new hotness of the game. I play Digimon, the card game, sometimes, I haven't bought any for ages because I just look at how many I have and go, ugh, and then I've missed expansions and I don't really want to get into new expansions. It's a whole thing. Don't get into card games unless you are acutely aware that you are probably going to spend a lot of money if you're really getting into them. You shouldn't try to tell your kids what choices to make for things like college or uni. Sure, you can help them, but don't try to tell them to do something that they don't want to do. Well then please, just don't choose a topic that's utterly useless in the real world and won't make you any money and then complain and moan that everyone else should pay for your education. That might sound critical of me, but with the power of the internet, you can honestly learn all of these things that you could at university for free. Which is why my position on college and university learning personally is that you should take a few years off, do things, live your life, figure out what you actually want to do and what you enjoy doing, and then go to university with the knowledge of what you want to do and that you love doing is worth pursuing and paying for. But hey, I'm just a disappointed voice on the internet that as of yet hasn't gone to university, so what does my opinion matter? Do not tell your children if they were gay you would not go to the wedding. It's like saying that if I don't fit your mold, I'm not worthy of your love. It's also setting yourself up for years of distrust. I want to be open and I want them to be a part of my life so badly, but if they knew anything, even suspected anything, they wouldn't want to be a part of mine. The job of a parent is to guide, discipline, and love unconditionally. You can't change how your kid came out, but you can still love them. My parents should learn that if I could be different, I would be. If I could change myself, I could be their definition of normal. I would be. My parents should learn that my wildest dream is for them to love me for exactly who I am, just as much as I love them. I totally agree with the general message here, gay teens getting kicked out of homes. It's real freaking hard on them, being left out in the elements and no one to love them and stuff, and usually falling into bad habits or with people that take advantage of their emotional state. But I do believe that there are limits to unconditional love. For example, killing someone in cold blood, being a kitty fiddler. Just two examples of things that I would personally disown anyone for. But just being not exactly set to the mold that people expect of you, it's complete bullcrap when people disown you for that. Stop thinking you know everything. I can't get over this. Whenever my mom and I are doing something that involves modern technology, she just takes over like she knows everything and messes it up. I know what to do and try to tell her calmly, but she doesn't listen and sends everything to hell. 2. Whatever people say or write is not me. Whenever my mom goes through my things, she sees what other people have wrote and accuses me of writing them. She then tells me to tell her the truth, which I do, and I will still get accused of lying. Privacy is real. You were a teenager and I am a teenager. I go through a lot and the least I can get is some privacy. I can go on Google and search for something and she'll come into my room and start reading what I'm typing out loud or stand behind me watching what I'm doing. She'll also go through my phone, which is annoying. I just log out of my stuff now. 4. Stop calling me every 5 minutes. School is long, hard, and tiring and I get frustrated. I go home and try to relax before chores. Mom comes home and starts calling me 24/7 over little things. One day I actually just stood leaning on the wall waiting for her to call me, so I didn't get comfortable. 5. Let me go places without you. I can't even go to a school football game without my mom saying I'm not going by myself. Then she complains why I'm always indoors. My mom also makes me do other irritating stuff which I don't follow anyway, like reading 2 to 4 chapters of the Bible before going on the iPhone, iPad, computer, TV, or playing games, GTA 5, Mortal Kombat X, etc. Limits on all devices. Well, I say, son, they don't sound like wholesome Christian games. I say, you gotta play yourself some Yakuza. Oh man, that just hit me. Mortal Kombat X was the last Mortal Kombat game I bought. Is it that old now? It's almost 10 years old, goddamn. I would say to them, the American dream idea is dead at this point in time. You could work hard and go to the right schools and have it still not pan out later in life. Half of the kids graduating higher education levels are having trouble finding jobs. So get off this idea that hard work leads to success, because it just is not true at this point in time. I see where this person is coming from a sense that I see a lot of things nowadays where, depending on what your sense of success is, whether it be followers or money or whatever like that, people do stupid, inconsequential stuff, and for some reason it brings them success. But guess what? Things might not work out the way that you wanted them to if you applied loads of hard work in school or on a topic or cultivating knowledge that you wanted because you thought, yeah, this will make me successful. But you know what? Life doesn't work like that. You now have the knowledge to do something, and you need to keep on striving and looking for the opportunities that you can get to apply that knowledge and those skills that you have cultivated yourself. It might take time before you can actually apply those things in a way that you deem makes you successful or content with life or whatever, but please, for the love of God, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on working hard and working towards your dreams.
Those who have walked out on first dates, what was your I'm outta here moment? Legitimately, when she said she needed to take a wee as we walked down a back alley next to the bar. She pulled her jeans down, took a poop behind a bin, then searched in the bin and wiped with a sheet of newspaper. I was totally infatuated with her after working with her for a few months, and in 30 seconds, it completely disappeared. Fast. Went to meet a guy for the first time at his house. There was a pile of toenail clippings on his coffee table, and it wasn't one recent clipping. It was like many clippings. I quickly left. She had 22 cats and would just randomly take in strays, not give them any vet care, and was planning on keeping a recent litter. I love cats. I paid the bartender when she went to the bathroom and hyper walked to the door. I forwarded her contact info and a summary of what she told me to the Humane Society. This guy and I were eating dinner after chatting for a couple of weeks, and unprompted, in the middle of something I was saying, and completely unrelated to what was being discussed, he said something along the lines of, "So you know in order for this to work you're gonna have to share yourself, right? My friends and I like to pass girls around." I was pretty dumbfounded, and after a bit of stuttering, I told him I didn't think it was gonna work. I asked for a to-go box and my portion of the check and noped out of there. I had a first date with a girl who insisted we go to a really expensive place, where she ordered a $25 appetizer, $45 steak, and a $15 drink. She also wouldn't put her phone down, kept taking calls and answering texts. The waitress noticed and motioned for me from behind her. I excused myself, and the waitress had made separate bills and asked if I wanted to pay my share and leave hers at the table. I said that would be wonderful, so I did. He invited me and a friend to play dodgeball with a group of folks I've never met. We're having an okay time, but he's paying more attention to his friends. But that's fine because I've got my friend to keep me occupied. We're hanging out in the parking lot before the first game is about to start when out of nowhere he grabs a ball and throws it at my crotch as hard as he can. This dude screams, "Wham bam, right in the clam." I immediately turn to my friend and ask her if she's ready to leave. I say goodbye to him and his friends, immediately come home to a gripe of texts about how immature I was behaving. I was on a first date with a military guy. He spent a large portion of the date talking about why the strippers in Toronto were better than the strippers where we lived. To change the topic, I asked him if he did any volunteer work with military overseas. And he said, "No, I joined the military to kill people, not help people." I got my bill, chugged my beer, and left as fast as I could. The fact that within 10 minutes of meeting him, he started making sexual comments and joking about following me home so he could stalk me if I rejected him. I got out with the help of a bartender who let me leave out the back door. Not me, but this happened to a friend. For context, this friend has a beard. So my friend picks up this girl and they're on their way to dinner. And she says, "You do realize that if this is gonna work, you have to shave that off, right?" He didn't say anything, just turned around and dropped her back off at her house. This is meeting someone from an online dating app. He turns up with pupils the size of dinner plates and super erratic. He said he'd forgotten his wallet, so I got the first round. We were on our way to the second pub to meet his friends so they could lend him some money. For the walk there, he spoke absolute garbage and nonsense nonstop, but ended with how he tried to drown his ex's chihuahuas in a pool. Near the pub, he said he had to answer whoever was calling him on the phone. At this point, we were 30 minutes into the date and already going to the next pub. He downed his drink in about 3 seconds. Whilst he stood there on the phone, I said I'd meet him at the pub. Everything was in close proximity. But instead, I walked past it and ran all the way home. 1 p.m. lunch date and she was drunk as a skunk. She invited me back to her place where she said her 2-year-old son wouldn't even notice. I noped out and called her a cab home. I still feel bad for the son years later. She finally let it slip that she had a boyfriend, but it was totally fine because things have been going bad for a long time and I'm gonna break up with him anyway. My thoughts were that if she would do that to him, she'd do it to me. No thanks. We had great chats online and decided to meet in person. He's got a Bluetooth headset on with a little LED light that shows it's on. He keeps it on during drinks. I work up the nerve to ask if he can take off the headset while we're eating dinner. With pride and complete confidence, he says, "Don't worry, you'll have my full attention. This isn't a phone headset, it's a camera." Invited me to a bar which was apparently close to his apartment and kept wanting to snuggle at his apartment with me. I left to a friend's party and met the man I'd been with for 3+ years. The first guy later texted me explicit photos on Easter Sunday. She brought her pet rat with her that was hanging out in her bra and kept feeding it French fries. She casually mentioned she had warrants, so I just faked an emergency and bailed. He started making inappropriate comments, then took me to his house to use the bathroom before the next part of our date. We had lunch first, then we were supposed to play mini golf. I didn't know he lived with his parents, so I had to meet them on the first date. They were nice, but I felt so uncomfortable because I already knew this wasn't going to move beyond date number 1 thanks to his remarks. He told me to wait in his room while he went to the bathroom, and I noticed that his computer was on. Before our date, he was chatting with a friend and left it up on the screen. The last message he'd sent said, "I hope I get to see her boobs. I bet they're so perky and small." What? Why leave that up and send me in there to see it? I lied, saying that my mom called with an emergency and needed me back home. Noped out of there and never spoke to him again. I had to pick him up and he complained about everything. My car, the way I drove, my music taste, why was I being so quiet whilst carefully plotting my escape plan? But it was definitely the moment he said, "My friends really want to meet you. I need them to know you're real." And that's when I bounced. He was 45 minutes late picking me up. Weather was quite poor, so I gave him a pass. We get to the coffee shop, I take off my jacket, and immediately he says, "Oh, I see you brought your A game. Or should I say D game?" Referring to my breasts. I'm surprisingly busty for my frame. Even the people 2 tables over just stopped and looked at him. I had invited a guy off a dating site to my house. When I opened the door, he said he could kill me if he wanted and to never meet anyone off the internet again. My 2 male roommates were in the kitchen because they knew this guy was coming and heard him. They ran him out of the house pretty damn quick. We started by chatting online. At the time, I was a smoker and told him. He said no big deal because he smokes too. We decided to meet up at Starbucks for coffee. First thing he said, "Hi, by the way, when I said I smoke, I was talking about meth." I said, "Oh, bye," and turned around and left. The guy wanted to meet at a place where I used to work at. I showed up and he was already there. I ordered vodka and we're glaring into the menu while his shots arrive and he's just pounding them back. The base bartender is giving the stink eye. I know him, so I'm like, WTF. The date steps out for the bathroom or to vape or something, and the bartender beelines to my table to warn me that this guy is a raging alcoholic that messed around with his cousin a few months back. I noped right out of there. I had a first date with a girl who told me, "Actually, I'm engaged, but I'm not 100% sure if he's the right one. So I'm just gonna go on a few dates to see if I change my mind." Check please. He invited me inside while he finished getting ready. No biggie. Once inside, he insisted that I let him show me his dungeon. Dude's apartment was pretty empty, minus a TV and couch. But his bedroom was kitted out. He then wanted the now uncomfortable me to see if the shackles on his bed fit me. Thankfully, I had set up for a friend to call me within the first 30 minutes of the date, and I faked an emergency. We were having the usual get-to-know-you conversation over drinks. I was telling her about how my car was stolen the night before, and her response was, "Don't you just hate blacks?" I never said who stole it. I was out of there. I hadn't even met the guy yet. We were still chatting online to set up the first date. We were going to be busy at different times that weekend, but I was interested and sincerely offered to meet a week later instead. He proceeded to get drunk by himself and sent a ton of sad messages about how he couldn't get a date and he was unattractive and I was totally gonna bail on him. Which wasn't the plan before, but it certainly was now. I have a few. Number 1, he told me I wasn't pretty enough to be so confident. Like, what? I was shocked, but the server came to my rescue and was like, "Girl, get out of here. No charge for your drink." Number 2, he told me that people looking at his sleeve tat without permission was the equivalent of women being assaulted for wearing skirts. What? Number 3, I sat down across from him and within 5 minutes of meeting me, he tried to slide his hand up my dress under the table. Yikes. Number 4, he told me he had too many back issues of The Economist to read, so he couldn't read anything I might suggest ever. And number 5, he told me his fiancée of 9 years had dumped him the week before. We were back at her place. She pulled out a giant glass jar that was full of what I thought was moonshine. She proceeded to explain to me that it was 100% GHB and that her kink is to be drugged with it before sex. She went into the bathroom and I got the hell out of there so fast that my imprint on the couch probably wasn't gone by the time I was driving. He was a friend of a friend. We went to a restaurant and ordered our food. While we waited, he started to say things like, "I'll eat this meal first, then I'll eat you out." I laughed because I thought he's just joking. I thought he's just nervous and his mouth lost his filter. Then when the waitress later asked if we want more to drink, he was like, "Yes, bring us something strong." I said, "Not for me, and that I have to drive later and just want a Coke." And he looked at me and was like, "Don't be stupid. You think we'll just do it once and I'll let you leave? You'll at least stay the night." The waitress looked at me with wide eyes like I'm crazy for even being there. After she left, I told him that he has to stop with this, that it was rude and that we're on our first date. He apologized and for 10 minutes it was okay. Then, as if a switch was turned on, he said just like that, mid-sentence, without even ending his previous story, "You know what, I can't control myself anymore. Either we go now or I'll screw you on this table." I told him I have to go to the bathroom. He complained like a baby that we have to go now. I went away anyway and went to the waitress, paid for the food, and left without a word. She wouldn't stop making fun of me. She was 26 and I was 36. Though if it matters, we were at the same place in our careers and income. She kept making jokes about my age, about how old and decrepit I was. Eventually, after telling her pretty directly to lay off, I just said, "You know, I'm not enjoying this. I'm gonna go," and paid for the table and left. Later, she said it was because she was overcompensating because she was self-conscious about how much younger she was. But that just means that when she's uncomfortable, she goes straight to demeaning the other person. It only happened once. She kept talking about her ex. I asked if she wanted to get back with him. She said, "I don't know," and showed me a picture of him. I couldn't leave fast enough. I drove us. I started to parallel park. I had been working in parking in San Francisco for years by then, and he said, "I'll park this for you. Women don't do well at parallel parking." At dinner, he was dismissive only to female waitstaff. I ran into these two hilariously drunk surfer dudes on my way from the bathroom, and they told me my date was a jerk. We laughed about it, and I went back to my table. When leaving, the drunk dudes were also outside. I said bye to them, and Jerkface had the nerve to bark, "She's with me." I told him to wait while I got in the car and unlocked the doors. Except I didn't. I drove off and left him standing there. The two drunk dudes whooped and yelled, "Go, lady, go!" Such an awesome finish to a terribly embarrassing date. It seemed to be going all right for a while. We meet late afternoon and went for a stroll around town, doing a bit of a pub crawl with a drink at each, followed by some food at a monthly food truck festival I knew about, which was going to be followed by a local bar and dancing. I kept seeing the same guy at all the locations, obviously following us. On a toilet break, I mentioned something to one of the pub doormen, who asked him to leave politely, although that got a little heated. She ran over to the doorman and explained that it was her husband. They had a thing of watching each other go out with someone and maybe watching them have sex. I did drop in a question if they had ever done more, like stealing from someone, and she accidentally said that it happened, but only a couple of times, before trying to say that she didn't mean it. I left them with the doormen and reported them to the police. I go to a bar and meet this cute girl, and we get along pretty fine. She invites me back to her place, but it turns out that she was with her friends at the bar and they were just giving her some space for us to talk. They were all drunk, and her friend was insisting on driving home, so her friend, agreed to let me drive them home, because the friend was very set on not leaving her truck parked outside a bar overnight. We get all the way to their apartment complex, and then getting into the parking spot was tricky. So the drunk friend/truck owner insisted on parking, and pulled the "I legally own this vehicle" card. I was some guy her friend met at a bar, so I was like, okay then. Within 5 seconds, she backs the truck into a drainage ditch and gets it stuck. We all have to push the truck and get covered in mud. While we're doing that, the girl I met at the bar had lost her wallet. So I dug through the mud water ditch at like 4 a.m. and didn't find her wallet. We get back to her place and the mood is definitely ruined. So we end up eating a random cheese and meat platter from Safeway on her kitchen floor at like 4 a.m. I sleep on the couch and wake up early and I think, well, she was great. It was just the whole truck thing that ruined it. I look for a pen and paper to write down my number before leaving. All I can find is a piece of paper taped to the inside of the door. It was a court date for a domestic violence/abuse hearing. I just left and chalked it up as a strange night. When he asked me to change my clothes because they weren't sexy enough and told me what I had to order for food, he ended the date by talking about his gun collection. Blind date set up by my grandparents. I love my granddad, and he's done so much for me, so I went. We met at a bar where my best friend worked. We get drinks and I'm talking to my friend. My date says, "This homo trying to hook up with you?" 1, he's not gay. 2, it wouldn't matter if he was. 3, he was just checking in on me. So I'm already done with him at this point, but my ride is still over an hour away. His mate shows up at one point and starts trying to flirt with me. It was gross. My date then starts asking about my hot friends and if I can get them to come out. I said, I like my friends, so no. He starts being racist against Pacific Islanders and was horribly rude to this German guy there drinking. When my ride gets there, I said, I'm leaving. He says, I got a big one for you. You should come home with me. I said, thanks, but I'd rather gouge out my eyes. The next day, he messaged me and said, you probably think I'm a bit of a jerk after last night, but do you want to go out again? I had no intentions of ever seeing him again. So I explained why his behavior was unacceptable and suggested he try making friends who are girls so he sees them as something other than a hole to stick his prick in. I told my grandparents everything. They told his parents, and apparently his dad was super embarrassed. My grandparents were then informed to stay out of my love life. And anytime they brought it up, I just say, I got a big one for you. You should come home with me. I work in fine dining. A friend of mine showed up to my restaurant on a first date with a guy who arrived drunk as a skunk. She's an absolutely beautiful, hilarious woman with a great career. Truly a catch. Friday night, full restaurant. There are tables in the middle of the floor where everyone could see. He continued to burn through 3 bottles of wine, started making some bad jokes about her looking loose. She suggested he stop drinking. He reached across the table and slapped her. We all ushered her out, and a bunch of men at the other tables were about to beat his butt, but we held them back until he paid his bill. He didn't have enough money and said he was planning on making her split the $300 tab with him. We called the cops. Bye, Patrick. Another time, I helped a woman sneak out the back of our restaurant after eavesdropping on her horrible date. Their table was right by the service station. He'd spent the entirety of the date complaining about his ex-girlfriend's eating disorder. From the moment they sat down and ordered drinks. Oh wow, you're having wine? That's so refreshing. My ex was anorexic. She had to count calories of everything. And the dude just never stopped. The woman dipped out in between the first and second course. He did a racist impression of his Asian professor while we were having dinner in a Vietnamese restaurant. He picked me up and drove though, so I couldn't leave on the spot. When we got in his car after dinner, he asked if I wanted to go back to his place. I made up an excuse as to why I couldn't. He made 2 calls on Bluetooth to hang out with other people while I was still in the car. It wasn't even while driving back. The car was still in park. All of this happened in about 10 minutes. I got to the bar after him. He had a glass of water on the table and slid it to me after I sat down. I said it's okay, he could have it, and I would wait to get my own. He scoffed and told me I don't know anything about being roofied, and I do. At 3 minutes in, he asked me if he could add me on Facebook so that he could touch himself to my photos. He told me I should stop going to the gym because he could barely get me as is, and if I lost weight, I'd be too hot and he'd have no chance. He then tried to get me to go back to his place, and I declined. He offered to let me sleep on his couch to make the idea more appealing. He then bragged about how much money he had, asked me how short I was on rent, saying he'd give me the money right now. I was not short on rent, and never said I was. Told me he could afford an UberX but would buy me an Uber pool home because he didn't know me that well. Lastly, he asked me not to BS him and be honest. Would I go on a second date with him? I said no. He stood up and screamed at me in the bar about how I'm the most shallow person he'd ever met, and that the only possible reason I would say no is because he's not good looking enough for me. He stared at my chest the entire time and told me he was in love with me. We had known each other 3 days. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.